We're live, right. Welcome to the meeting of the Planning and Regulatory Committee. The agenda papers and other relevant information for this meeting are available for the public viewing on the Herefordshire Council website. Please remember your words and actions should be chosen carefully, and members are reminded that speeches are limited to 3 minutes. The Council is streaming this meeting live on the Herefordshire Council YouTube channel and also making a recording. The recording will be available via the Council's website shortly after the meeting has concluded. Other attendees are permitted to film, photograph and record the meeting, provided that it does not disrupt the business of the meeting. If you do wish to be filmed or photographed, do not wish to be filmed or photographed, please identify yourself so that anyone who intends to record the meeting is made aware of this. None. To ensure the recording quality is maintained, could members speak as clearly as possible and keep background noise to a minimum, and ensure that mobile phones and other devices are turned to silent. Welcome to those in attendance. I now ask Mr. Withers to introduce all the officers.
Thank you, Councillor James. Good morning, everybody. My name is Simon Withers. I'm one of the development managers and I'll be assisting the committee today with planning advice. If I can now introduce the rest of the team who will be helping out too. On my immediate left, we have Georgina Coley, who is the senior solicitor for planning and highways. On my right, Josh Bailey, who will be presenting the first item on today's agenda. Next to Josh is Rebecca Genman, who is presenting the second item. And then next to Rebecca is Katie Jones, the area engineer team leader, who will be assisting with any highways related advice that the committee may need. Joining later for items Josh will also be presenting the last item, and then joining later will be Adam Lewis, who is speaking on the Clubtail Drive item. Thank you.
Thank you. And now we'll move on to item 1 on the agenda. Apologies for absence. We've received apologies from Councillors Catherine Jennard and Charlotte Taylor. Councillor Engel is the local member for the first application, land at Greyhound Close, and will not take his seat on the committee at this meeting. Right, we'll move on now to named substitutes. Item 2, Councillor Foxton is acting as a substitute for Councillor Taylor. Councillor Justin Pebbury is acting as substitute for Councillor Jennard, and Councillor Liz Harvey is acting as substitute for Councillor Engel. Item 3, declarations of interest. Can I have an indication if anyone wishes to declare interest? No. Right, there are none. We'll move now on to the minutes of the meeting held on the 4th of June 2025. Are the minutes of the meeting approved? Please indicate. Yeah. Any against? Abstentions? So that's carried. Thank you. There are no chairman's announcement. Now I'll move on to the first application on the agenda. Can I request that public speakers present in person for the agenda item 6 join the meeting? Mr. Cook, Mr. Arthur and Mr. John. Please, if you could take your places at the participation tables at the front. Anyway, good morning and thank you for coming. Can I will call you to speak when the officer's presentation has taken place. We'll now move on to Mr. Bailey, who will make a presentation.
Thank you, Chairman. The application site comprises an irregular land parcel of agricultural grassland. It measures approximately 0.57 hectares and is located immediately southeast of an existing residential development known as Greyhound Close within the settlement of Longtown. The topography of the site slopes gently from north to south and east to west, with boundary treatments comprising predominantly hedgerows with the occasional gap or fencing. There are also a small number of younger trees positioned in the northeastern extent of the site. This application seeks full planning permission for the erection of 8 dwellings and associated development, and for context, the red star on screen denotes the application site. And the next slide, please. There we go. Despite its inherent rural location, as members would have appreciated in travelling to the site yesterday, Longtown benefits from a range of services and amenities, including a village shop, primary school, public house, place of worship and village hall. Characterised as a linear village consisting of clustered groups of dwellings of random spacing, which largely addresses the lowland C1203, there are notable pockets of more modern cul-de-sac development as the village has naturally grown. There is also a wide array of architectural styles and modern properties to listed buildings and dwellings of a more rural character, but it retains a village layout which notably dates back to its medieval form, as members can gather from the screen, which outlays the settlement in more detail. And the next slide, please. Which will bring up the location plan, which defines the application site edged in red, and it'd be appropriate to highlight here that this site relates to a proposed allocation known as land southeast of Greyhound Close under policy LGPC2 of the Longtown Group NDP. And the next slide, please. Which will bring up the proposed site plan, in which the proposed site layout shows that a new internal access road would extend southeast of Greyhound Close, where both vehicular and pedestrian access would continue to be taken from. The road would be built to adoptable standards with 2-metre footways either side. These would link with the existing road and footway, with dwelling houses broadly being arranged in 2 rows with associated parking and amenity space. The application also incorporates proposals for additional landscaping, including a proposed such drainage feature, proposed shared open space, proposed new orchard planting, retention or replacement of, where appropriate, native species semi-mature hedgerow, and proposed native meadowflower or grass swaths. Highway improvement works are also proposed, including drop curbs to be provided alongside the C1203 on both sides of the junction with Greyhound Close, which is identified within the extent of the blue dashed line on the plan on the screen. And the next slide, please. Which should bring up the drainage strategy. There we go. Which proposes foul water drainage to be managed by connection to the existing main sewer network before it enters the treatment works a short distance from the site. Surface water is proposed to direct runoff from the impermeable areas on the site to an attenuation pond located at the lowest point of the site in the southern corner, with permeable paving in car parking areas and shared driveways, and rain gardens also proposed in front and rear gardens. And the next slide, please, which will bring up the proposed elevations. These are shown on the screen for you. So we'll begin briefly in the top left, which is plots 1 and 2, which would be 3-bedroom bungalows. Then the top right, which is plots 3 and 4, which would be a pair of 2-bed semi-detached dwelling houses. Then the bottom left photo, which is plots 5 and 6, which are 2 detached 3-bedroom dwellings. And then finally the bottom right, which is plots 7 and 8, which would be 2 detached 4-bedroom dwellings. External materials are of rough coarse natural stone, painted timber cladding in mid-grey, and through colour render facades under blue-grey roof slates. And the next slide, please, which should bring up the photos that I took after we did come out on site yesterday, which for those who were unable to join us in the lovely weather, beginning in the top left, moving clockwise, the first photo is looking south from the existing access gate where we stood largely for the meeting. Then the top right photo is taken from the east of the site looking west towards Hatterall Ridge. Then the bottom right photo is taken from the southeastern boundary looking north back towards Greyhound Close where we stood. And then finally the bottom left photo is taken from the southern corner looking east towards the C1203. And the next slide, please. As members will have picked up in both the report and as I had said on our site inspection yesterday, Longtown benefits from a well-connected public rights-of-way network, which is dashed in the annotated image on the bottom left of your screen there. Officers have just sought to pick out several viewpoints in addition to the submitted landscape and visual impact assessment, which has been provided as supporting information. So these first photographs on screen are taken from the public right-of-way LQ66, which lies to the northwest of the application site. So if you look at the bottom left annotated map, you'll see the direction where it's been taken from in relation to the site, and they're just heading further west as you go along the field. And the next slide, please. which will bring up the photos then taken from public right-of-way LQ9, which lies just north of the Welsh Water Treatment Plant, and this is looking north, northeast and east towards Greyhound Close and the application site, so members can sort of get an impression then of appreciating the topography of the surrounding wider open countryside beyond the application site. And the next slide, please, which will bring up a sort of more long distance perspective. This photograph be taken from the Landscape and Visual Impact Assessment, which shows the view from a public right-of-way adjacent to Office Dyke Path upon Hatterloll Ridge, which also acts as an eastern boundary of Banau Blecheiniog National Park, or formerly the Brecon Beacons National Park. And the next slide, please, which will bring up the relevant designated heritage assets of this application, which you can see on screen. So you'll see there in the top left the old Greyhound where we congregated yesterday morning, and then also the milestone on the opposite side of the C1203 where many of you parked yesterday morning, both of which are Grade 2 listed. You've also then have the scheduled monument of Longtown Castle and Town, which is on the infilled red line on the annotated map below, which covers several land parcels across the extent of Longtown, and in terms of its relationship to the site, the application site being denoted by the red star. And the next slide, please, which will bring up several images taken along Greyhound Close and the junction with the C1203 to give an essence of existing access arrangements and also some immediate local vernacular, to which if we go to the next slide, please. There we go. These are just taken then from the immediate vicinity of the C1203, so members can get a bit of a flavour then for the local vernacular and the context of the street scene. The next slide, please. These are then the main material planning considerations, which you can see on screen, which broadly follows the layout of the officer appraisal, and I will just draw members' attention to the summary of the planning balance, which is largely undertaken within section 6.97 to 6.100, inclusive of the officer report for this item. And then the next slide, which will be the final one, to which, in concluding, the harms that have been identified in the officer appraisal are not considered to significantly or demonstrably outweigh the benefits when assessed against the policies in the NPPF taken as a whole, having regard to key policies on directing development to a sustainable location, achieving well-designed places and making effective use of land. This position has been reached in noting the out-of-date nature of the Council's adopted core strategy, and that the Longtown Group NDP is now over 5 years old, which at the time of the decision making does not benefit from the enhanced provisions of paragraph 14 of the NPPF, further to the well-documented government reforms on planning last year. Just to finally draw members' attention to the update sheet, which has been published yesterday, there's just a very minor point of clarification on a point of the conclusion on heritage matters, referring to the fact that this current application was originally submitted for 9 dwellings before amendments were made to omit one of them in seeking to improve both the amenity and more openness to the site at the request of officers. And then the update also seeks to provide some assurance to a couple of queries which were raised during the site inspection. On that understanding, it is considered that planning permission should therefore be granted as set out in the officer recommendation. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Bailey. Now I'll move on to the public speakers. Can I invite Mr. Cook to speak on behalf of Longtown Parish Council? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The Parish Council object to this planning application in its present form and note that there have been numerous objections and no support. We were proud and privileged when the Longtown Group Parish Neighbourhood Development Plan was adopted just over 5 years ago, as it gave us an opportunity to help shape future development. Prior to this, we had seen the building of many executive-style 4- and 5-bedroomed homes, which were great for people wanting to upsize and move to this unique and historic location in the Olcon Valley, but not for local people wanting to downsize or buy their first home. In principle, we are not against development of the site, as it was identified as such under the NDP, where there was a unanimous preference for starter homes, easy access small bungalows and low-cost properties. The Parish Council has spent hours discussing this site, but we are unable to support it in its present format, as we consider that the current proposals represent massive overdevelopment in density, style and size of housing, and does not provide housing of the type required by the area. The current application proposes 2 3-bedroom bungalows which are too large. The semi-detached designs are suitably affordable, but detached houses are in good supply locally and others have been built or planned under Class Q permissions and are not needed. The design and layout are not in keeping with a rural village like Longtown, particularly considering the visibility of the site from the National Park, and the harm to the landscape setting and overall character of Longtown is contrary to LD1 landscape and LD4 historic environment and heritage assets of the core strategy. We have serious concerns about the foul and stormwater drainage strategy of the development. The proposal shows the installation of a sustainable drainage system, and a civil engineer has advised the Parish Council that the size of this system is far too small for the expected rainwater runoff from the site. Under the proposals, the stormwater would feed into the Olcombe Brook and its tributaries flow into the River Wye, which itself has serious pollution problems and is in poor condition. Foul water from the property is to be directed to the Longtown sewage treatment plant, which is over 50 years old and is not able to cope with the flows during heavy rainfall and is flooded and requires updating. We often see foul water erupting through drain covers, and these discharges then flow directly into the Olcombe Brook and River Monnow. The Grade 2 listed Old Greyhound has suffered with foul water flooding in the house. This is not an acceptable situation and will be made worse by additional houses. Finally, the Parish Council is concerned that the new National Planning Policy Framework, the need to review the local plan and requirement to build additional houses will lead to pressure to grant planning applications that have not been properly considered under an informed and carefully assessed process. We believe that there are too many variances and discrepancies in this application as it stands for planning permission to be granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Can I now ask Mr. Arthur, a local resident, to speak in objection to the application?
Thank you for the opportunity to speak today for the local residents. We want to be clear that we are not opposed to houses being built on this site. We recognise the need for sustainable housing development in Longtown. The local NDP designated this farmland for smaller, sympathetically designed starter homes and homes suitable for downsizing. We have been consistent and clear that we welcome development that aligns with this vision, especially as these kinds of houses are not being provided by other developments. We need smaller houses. This need has not changed, but 3/4 of the houses in this proposal have 3 bedrooms or more. There are more bedrooms in a larger footprint and at a higher housing density than the previously rejected proposals for this site. These are the wrong houses. Nor are the design and layout sympathetic or in keeping with the setting. These concerns are shared by the Senior Landscape Officer and Historic England. They believe accepting this proposal represents harm to the landscape and the overall character of Longtown and is contrary to this core strategy. Given the location, this harm will be permanently visible from the surrounding higher ground, including the National Park. Infrastructure to support larger development is lacking. Residents have expressed concerns about existing problems with drainage and sewage, water pressure, transport and biodiversity. This proposal would make this situation worse, impacting upon surrounding uses and amenities. The proposal also fails to comply with mandatory biodiversity net gain regulations. The proposal does not meet our housing needs and is inconsistent with the character of the village, making it contrary to the core strategy and NDP policies. That is the primary issue here, and why there is no support amongst residents. This is speculative development, not sustainable development. The proposal should be rejected. But there is another important issue. This is about our right to appropriate development in our community. The current NDP enabled us to work together to identify our local needs and priorities and establish the conditions for sustainable development, including for this specific site. Imposing this proposal upon us disregards this right. The immediate consequence will be that we get houses we do not need, and we lose the opportunity for this land to be used to provide the smaller houses that we do need. We aren't trying to stop houses being built. This is about preventing the wrong houses being built, and about our right for appropriate development. We welcome suitable houses on this site to meet local needs, but this proposal will not provide them. It is inconsistent with the core strategy and the NDP, and we ask you to reject this proposal. Thank you.
Thank you. And now I invite Mr. John, the applicant's agent, to speak in support of the application.
Good morning, members. Thank you for the opportunity to address you today. This application is, of course, recommended for approval, and given the officer's comprehensive presentation and report, I'll keep my speech relatively brief. As members will be aware, this is an allocated housing site in the neighbourhood development plan for up to 12 units and is wholly within settlement limits. The application before you is of course only for 8 units, a number derived from extensive and detailed dialogue and liaison with your officers, consultees and previous applications at the site. This ensures that appropriate density has been met. The previous application was solely and only refused on inappropriate housing mix. This has been comprehensively addressed as a result of this scheme to now include bungalows for older generations, 2-bed units for younger people to stay in the area, together with family housing. Without repeating the content of the report before you, officers have closely and carefully addressed the application and have found acceptable in all respects. For example, residential amenity, drainage and highways. The summary, planning balance and conclusion section of the report sets out a concise summary of the overall position of the officers. The principle of development has been considered to be acceptable by officers, whilst a significant number of range of positive economic, environmental and social benefits have been identified, not least in helping to address a significant shortfall in the 5-year housing land supply position. Moreover, officers have deemed that the proposed scheme is acceptable in a wide range of technical reports, subject to the imposition of conditions. For example, the imposition of construction environmental management plan, which includes soil management. This reflects and is a product of detailed and comprehensively evidenced application submission. Only slight harm in landscape terms has been identified, albeit, given the allocation of the site, this was found to be acceptable as part of the previous application and subsequent appeal relating to it. The benefits of bringing forward this sympathetic form of development with significant and adequate separation distances between neighbouring dwellings proposed on an allocated site within settlement limits considerably outweighs this. To conclude, and in line with the officer's conclusions and recommendation, the development is in accord with the aims and objectives of planning policy. Planning officers and strategy consultees have found that the scheme is suitable and acceptable, and the application is recommended for approval accordingly. I therefore respectfully request you support the recommendation of your officers and approve the application. Thank you very much for your time.
Thank you. And now could I ask that the speakers return to the public gallery, please? Thank you. Thank you. And now we move on to the opening of the debate. The local member is Councillor Engel. He is the ward member for this item. He speaks first and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate. He does not have a vote. He has a 10-minute time limit on what he says. Thank you. Councillor Engel.
Thank you, Chairman. When I first came to live in the magical Golden Valley in the early 1990s, one vista thrilled me more than any of the others. It was the descent into the village of Longtown down the Bryn, the road many of you travelled yesterday. A confection of stone cottages set against the background of the Hatterall Ridge. It never failed to enchant me. At the time, I had more pressing interest than the mysterious politics of the old South Herefordshire Council. So it came as a shock when a group of out-of-scale, 4-bed, big beige suburban houses suddenly burst out front and centre of my view. Some old-timers still shake their heads and wonder how they got there. Unfortunately, this now seems to have spread to being a precedent. Those houses became known to the villagers as the Lego houses, and to this day they have a habit of not selling. One house has now been on the market for 2 years. 10 years after that, there came another development Roman Way, not quite so in your face, but what was meant to be 9 medium-sized houses somehow became 7 larger ones. In 2019, the village drew the current neighbourhood plan. The consultation was particularly thorough, and perhaps naively, councillors and respondents thought they might have a say. They were open to new homes, but were particularly anxious were particularly anxious that they should prioritise local needs, especially for the old and young. The land next to Greyhound Close already had its own section in the plan. Quotes, "The development should provide low-density, single-storey housing to suit older people and to protect the view of Hatterall Hill," said the first draft. However, some editor, presumably from planning, changed that to a begging note. If appropriate, the development could provide low-density, single-storey housing, etc. Well, it jolly well is appropriate. This week, Rightmove has been advertising a total of 7 houses for sale in Longtown and adjacent Clodagh. The prices range from $425,000 to $950,000. 5 of them had 4 bedrooms, 2 of them 3. Most of these houses were on the market many months ago. Coming soon is a mini village on the Bryn, built largely under Class Q, destined to throw up about 6 more £500,000 plus houses. Fine for second homes, local needs, forget it. Longtown is uniquely disadvantaged in southwest Herefordshire in this matter. The other 2 large villages in the Golden Valley, Lewis Harold and Peterchurch, have bungalows for around $200,000 and Peterchurch has a flat for $100,000. And both have a much greater supply of social housing. In Longtown, local old people cannot downsize, the young cannot start. That's the background. Let me take you to this particular project. In 2021, the planning officers rejected a proposal of 6 dwellings because the houses proposed did not reflect local demand. There were more discussions during which the number of discussions between planners and developers, not the parish council. The number yo-yoed back up to 10, back down to 6, and that satisfied the planning department. And it came in 2022 to this committee, where it was rebuffed overwhelmingly. Some of you were here, by you and the inspector for the wrong housing mix, because it was 100% 3 and 4 bedroom units. The inspector, using the area needs assessment for the whole Golden Valley, said the going rate was 65%. That's now down to 75%. But if you take Longtown alone, even the 65% is way too high. My own research, or Rightmove's research, shows a figure much closer to 0%. There is no argument, as the other speakers have said, about the principle of building, but the current plan is still deeply disturbing. When the latest version appeared, it looked quite promising because for the first time, the applicant included the bungalows that were requested from the start. Longtown has hardly any bungalows at all, compared to the 38 in a single cluster for the aged in Lewis Harold. But it turned out these were not small homes for the old. They both had 3 bedrooms, £100,000 extra, I would guess. A complete negation of the parish council's intention. Furthermore, they are cramped together at the very back of the field on the left, as you were yesterday. Together, the 6 smaller homes in this place occupy only 1/3 of the available space. One of them is so close to the existing cottage behind that the occupant will not merely lose the view of the mountain he had before, but have it replaced by a wall 15 metres away. Another will be even closer to its new neighbour. This is cruel and unnecessary. There is another fact well known in Longtown. In every version of this design, one house fronting on the road with a mountain view has always been going to retain that, and the house belongs to the applicant. Should that really be the #1 priority for a successful development? Furthermore, I am told that neither the council nor anyone else in the village have ever been allowed to have a discussion with the applicant or her representatives in the 8 years of the saga. I asked the agent if I could have a meeting to see if we could find common ground. Answer, no. 2 years ago, the inspector considered her judgment on the housing mix. It was so overwhelming, she did not even discuss the difficulty of access for traffic, highway safety, difficult access for construction, water and sewage issues. She did not say there were no other problems. In that 2022 committee meeting, my much missed predecessor, Peter Ginman, sitting where I am today, honed in on one other issue. Welsh Water had said their 50-year-old sewage plant was perfectly capable of dealing with the sewage of the new houses. They said it again this April in a letter to the applicant, but adding, our response is based on the information provided by your application. This is not the point. Longtown has multiple water issues, chronic outbreaks of low water pressure, floods and sewage issues. As Peter said 3 years ago, I suggest the condition of water supply should be reviewed for the whole village and not for a single development because of the risk of moving problems further up the village, and we have evidence of that within the past few months. This case has had a dreadful effect on this lovely village. An excellent parish council unanimously have seen the flaws in every single time, facing an unseen enemy who has refused to speak to them. If this goes through with this huge number of rejections from residents and an applicant who has treated them with contempt, really, then what does that say about the relevance of a parish council? Why bother? And the bitterness will go on indefinitely. I believe that even now it is possible to construct a satisfactory solution if the committee is so minded. A possible compromise. If I'm allowed to, perhaps I can throw this into the debate. One, to turn the bungalows into two-bedroom houses. Two, which this would partly solve the problem of cramping and cruelty to the neighbours, and improve things for the bungalows as well. And three, a genuine look at the water problems which Peter requested 3 years ago. There's one other, as things stand, this remains in breach of Herefordshire RA2, Longtown's LGPC 1, especially Clause E, quotes, development shall not adversely affect the amenity of adjacent properties, and LGPC 2 as well. There is one other breach. Let me quote paragraph 82 of the National Planning Policy Framework of December 24, which I believe now constitutes the word of God. In rural areas...
Councillor Emeralds, you've gone over the 10 minutes.
Can I just say the last sentence, because it's crucial?
Yeah, the last sentence, yes.
In rural areas, planning policies and decisions should be responsive to local circumstances and support housing developments that reflect local needs. Can we please do that?
Thank you. Now I'll open the debate. Can I now ask for speakers, please? Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. A lot of speeches from the heart this morning, which is encouraging and puts us in a particularly difficult position. We have to make our decision based on the report presented to us and the comments from the planning department, and we have to take account of what people tell us. But ultimately, the decision as to what is to be built or requested to be built on these sites is a matter for the developers in conjunction with the planning department. It was a very useful site visit yesterday and an excellent presentation by the planning officer, Mr. Bailey. I've never been to Longtown before. Whether I'd want to go back again along those roads, I don't know. But it has its appeal, I suppose. But I was encouraged to see in the report there was a good mix of housing recommended there. It's bungalows and a pair of semis, which is unusual nowadays. And it seemed to me to be not an overdevelopment of that particular site. I don't actually have a problem with this, and I will support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Any other speakers? Councillor Harvey.
Yes, thank you, Chair, and thank you to the speakers who've represented extremely well the views of their community and also the ward member. I've spent a bit of time in Longtown and the surrounding area over the last couple of years, and it is a truly spectacular bit of Herefordshire. I think anybody who went on the site visit yesterday will have been blown away by the views, and I really enjoyed going down the little lanes on the way there and on the way back. I think I absolutely recognise and share the frustration that the community and the parish council have, that they've been really clear about what they want for this site and have a neighbourhood plan which has been positively prepared and has stated clearly what they believe their community needs. We are short in Herefordshire of smaller homes that allow people to take positive decisions to downsize as they get older and free up larger homes that already exist for families to occupy. It's a little bit like one of those puzzles where you've only got one piece, one hole, and you've got to keep sort of moving things around to get the picture right. And for me, it's hugely frustrating that it doesn't really seem to be possible to deliver the kind of housing mix that enables this juggle puzzle on the housing market to deliver for local people. If this was looked at in isolation, 2 bungalows and then 2 2-bedroom, 2 3-bedroom, 2 4-bedroomed homes, it would look like a decent mix of housing developed on the site. But when you look at the bigger picture, it seems like the community is clear in saying we need more of one sort of housing because we've got an oversupply of the other sort, and we need to make our local housing market work for new housing starters as well as people wanting to downsize. I really struggle with this. When we were on site, I asked about rainwater harvesting and how under heavy rainfall conditions water was going to be managed, and I'm afraid I wasn't convinced by the answers that I heard, and it's interesting that these points are being raised again here in the room. It's disappointing by the sounds of things. The applicant hasn't been prepared to come together with the community to try and find a more acceptable solution. And if the ward member believes that that's still possible, I would certainly be supportive of that conversation being encouraged to take place ahead of any final decision being made on this development. If it's going to go to a vote rather than a deferral to seek that dialogue in committee today, then I'm minded to vote against.
Thank you. Councillor Thomas.
Yes, I'd like to thank everybody for what has been said. I have a problem with this. Not so much the mix of houses, although it is probably not ideal for what the locals need. But I am very aware that the sewerage system in Longtown is, as I tend to speak, of 50 years old and is flooding and putting a lot of a lot of discharges into the brook. I don't think the drainage is right, but with the mix of houses, even if we altered the mix of houses, probably that isn't going to get that's not going to get solved. So I'm going to sort of see really what other speakers think, whether or not I vote for or against it. We desperately need these houses, yes, but as the speakers have said, probably not the right sort of mix of houses. Whether or not we'd be allowed to defer this, as the last speaker said, to allow more negotiations and perhaps a better mix of houses, I don't know. I will have to be advised on that one. But for the moment, I'm going to wait and see.
Councillor Simon.
Thank you, Chair. And thank you to Mr Bailey for the site visit yesterday and the report, and also to all those who have spoke with so much passion about how they feel and what they want to see come forward in their community. I feel really stuck with this development because I understand exactly what the local community are asking for, but I'm also very conscious of the fact that we do not have a 5-year housing land supply, which significantly tilts the balance in favour of development. I do feel that this site has the ability to accommodate the housing as put in front of us by this application. I understand what the local community are saying about needing smaller houses and more of them, and particularly affordable. This site is not big enough to deliver, I don't think, that those housings, in terms of you would increase the number of houses on the site, which then increases the density of the layout. And I feel that that would be really detrimental to the setting and context of their. At the moment, the density on that site is relatively low in comparison to other developments that we see in more urban areas, and it properly reflects that area and the layout and density of other properties around there. I really do see, looking at the size of the floor space within those properties, the bungalow at 88 metres square and the type C, the 2 beds at 91 metres square, are not particularly large. I do appreciate that the 3 and 4 bedroom house, and particularly the 4 bedroom, is substantially larger. I'm not convinced that this. I think this is a compromise. I think it does give us a bit better housing mix than what was previously dismissed at appeal. And I do see that there are, there's the greenfield runoff rates are being achieved for the attenuation basin. I would like to see, if this was approved, water butts and other things to harvest rainwater to further prevent runoff from roofs into soakaways and things like that. I think that would be really important to add as a condition. Yeah, I'd like to see if anyone else is got any further comments on this one.
Okay, Councillor Andrews.
Thank you, Chair. This is obviously a very contentious application that's seems to have been going on for some time. The site is earmarked for housing, and as a previous speaker has said, unfortunately we no longer have a 5-year housing land supply, and I think that if we refuse this application, it would go to appeal, we would lose, and probably with costs. So with some unhappiness, I would support the application.
Is anyone opposing? Councillor Baker, is that seconded? Yes. Yes, Councillor Andrews. Okay. Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Chair. I've seen what happens when foul water backs up along a road and the manhole covers pop up. It is pretty horrific. It's mostly water, but it's the wrong colour. And it's foul smelling. It happened last year in Leominster, in a major housing estate that was on a significant slope. It was going downhill. You would have thought that wouldn't happen. But what had happened is this very old drainage system had collapsed because of all the work that had been going on further down the hill, the new developments. And it happened while we were doing Corn Square. But it is disgusting. It's very distressing. It polluted a whole load of houses around there, and the sewage area works. You know, there have been some more works, some more improvements there. But even today, well, recently over December, the manhole covers blew up again on Station Road because of heavy rain in this case. So I can totally sympathise with the fear that the local residents would have that we're overloading a system. Now, one of the things I haven't checked, and I'm sorry for this, and maybe the planning officer can tell me, is how many bathrooms are on those, because we've got 3 bedrooms, 2 bedrooms, 4 bedrooms. I mean, are these en suites? Is it 2 bathrooms per house? Is it 1 per bedroom? If that would give us an indication of the extra load on there. And I really would find it difficult to support this unless it was taken into consideration as a whole for how it impacts the local houses and the villages as a whole. And if it has that sort of impact, it's devastating, and I would not support it unless that was resolved.
Mr. Bailey, do you want to make a comment on that? Yeah, okay. Okay.
Can I just come back on a more general point, given the concerns around the capacity of the treatment plant, which obviously I haven't experienced, but are clearly issues and concerns for people locally. As a committee, you obviously need to be aware of the fact that in consultation with Welsh Water, the statutory body responsible for the maintenance of that facility, have not raised an objection. And similarly, albeit on an unrelated matter, the outfall from that system has been considered and assessed by our ecologist from the point of view of habitat regulations assessment, and screened the project out. So whilst I appreciate those concerns, as a decision maker, refusing planning permission on that ground would be an extremely risky decision based on Welsh Water's position.
Mr. Bailey.
Just to confirm, it's one bathroom, 1 ensuite, and 1 toilet for each house type, if that assists.
Right. Can I just, before we move on, perhaps a little clarity on the appeal and the grounds? It was actually said that the grounds that, in effect, we've had an appeal. I was part of the committee that actually refused this an application on this site 3 years ago. It went to appeal and it was refused and the grounds. And really, we need to concentrate on those grounds. Everything else was more or less agreed by the inspector.
Yes, so just to be clear,
I think the local member has a misunderstanding of the inspection system, because it's not mentioned. If the inspector had objections to other items, he would have raised them at the time.
So for clarity, Councillor James is right. The previous decision taken by this committee was to refuse a scheme for 6 houses based on the view that there was an inadequate mix of house sizes in that development. That was the single ground for refusal. So the council did not at that time object to heritage, landscape, constraints with the infrastructure, highway safety, and in the appeal decision the inspector endorsed that position and focused on that sole reason for refusal. Now that obviously was a scheme for 6 houses. You are being asked to consider a scheme with a different layout for 8 houses. I would say my advice is that from the point of view of the infrastructure, highway safety and those concerns, that those are matters that I think have probably been closed off as far as defendable grounds are concerned based on that appeal decision. Impacts on amenity, landscape effects, heritage associated with this different proposal are clearly matters that the committee can apply themselves to. But I come back to the fact that the concerns about drainage are not supported by the statutory undertaker, and that would be a risky territory. I'll say that again.
Other speakers? There are none. Can I ask whether the officers wish to make any further comments? Or none? Then I go to the local member.
Just on the point of the comment about rainwater harvesting, that you'll see from the update that there was a clarification about the fact that rain gardens are included, but I see no reason why a further condition couldn't be added to secure additional clarification or additional commitments to rainwater harvesting on the site, if that's the will of the committee.
The proposer and seconder, are you happy with that? Agreed. Yeah. Right, I'll now go to the local member.
Thank you, Chairman. Firstly, let me read what the appeal decision says. I have had regard to other matters raised, including traffic generation, highway safety, difficulties of access for the construction, absence of renewable energy technology, etc., etc., etc. As I am dismissing the appeal on the main issue for the reasons given above, I have not pursued these matters further. It did not give any of those a clean bill of health. She just made her decision on the first and most important point. As far as to Councillor Simmons and Councillor Andrews, to whom I have both the highest regard, there is no suggestion that these are not going to be built. There's going to be no, there will be no change to the number of houses built. All that we are asking is a way of making it more palatable to the residents, some of whom are going to suffer really quite hardship. The one house in particular will basically have their life ruined. You know, imagine replacing a mountain with a wall a few yards from your back window. So nobody wants to stop this. All I have asked is that we could consider the possibilities that we can remove those problems by having a two-bedroom bungalow, which would be affordable, which would take up less space, and which would enable the whole village and the whole site to breathe more easily. That's this is. I'm afraid that if this goes through without any conditions, this will really be a terrible blow to Longtown and will cause immense bitterness. And I rest my case. Unless I would like somebody to come up and back my proposal.
Can I say we're at a point where that may or may not happen, but we've got to go through the process as legally defined.
Right.
It was just really.
Have you finished? Sorry.
I
thought you said you rest your case. I thought you said you rest your case.
I rest my case, but not easily.
I don't want to make the situation difficult, but the appeal, the inspector's words in summarising her conclusion on the appeal stated, and this is the point I was trying to make, perhaps not clearly enough, about the consistency of decision making when we're considering what we are considering today. She said, however, I note that the council did not object to the proposal on these grounds. So that's the point. The inspector wasn't inclined to challenge the council's position, but obviously held firm on the reason for refusal, which was limited to the housing mix. So it's words, and you can interpret them how you wish. But I think the point is more to do with the consistency of decision making and what the committee can properly consider in relation to this application, and what I think would present a concern for me in terms of possible other reasons for refusal.
Right. Can I now? I'm afraid we've come to the end of the debate. For legal reasons, I don't think we should open the debate on this particular proposal as proposed and seconded. I think our legal representative would say that we'd find ourselves in some difficulty if we did. Can I ask? We have a proposal before us, which has been proposed and seconded along the lines of the officer's recommendation plus an addendum, I think, of condition. Can I ask for those in favour, please indicate.
1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 in favour.
Those against.
1, 2, 3, 4 against.
Then that is carried. Abstention, sorry. Yeah. Right, now can we have a 10-minute break if you can Jonathan, can you hear us?
Yes,
Yeah, okay.
Chairman, I can hear you and see you.
Okay. Right, then we'll move on now to the second application, land at Stoke Edith. The proposed operation of a renewable energy generation station comprising ground-mounted photovoltaic inverter transformer units, control rooms, substations, on-site grid, connection equipment, site access and access gates, internal access tracks, security measures and other ancillary infrastructure. Can I now move on to our officers' presentation, Ms. Rebecca German.
Thank you, Chairman, and good morning. Can I begin by thanking all members who attended the site visit yesterday, which I hope you all found informative. I would like to begin by drawing members' attention to the update sheet, which provides a clarification on the export capacity of the scheme following a representation received from a member of the public. I have also included an additional condition to the recommendation in line with the requirements of the Riverlug Internal Drainage Boards and the Environment Agency to ensure an easement of 9 metres from the top of the riverbank is maintained for maintenance and access, especially following a flood event. Moving on to the presentation.
Can I just pause a moment? Can public speakers please take their seats at the participation tables at the front of the Mrs. Fenton, Mr. Breeze and Mr. Clemens. Thank you and welcome.
Moving on to the presentation. The application site is identified on the slide in the usual manner by the red star. It is to the east, it is in the east of Herefordshire and sits on the junction of 3 rural parishes of Weston Begard, Yarkhill and Stoke Edith. The site is to the west of the C1149, which is a short road which connects the A438 Hereford to Ledbury Road to the south with the A4103 Worcester Road to the north. The application in front of you seeks permission for a ground-mounted solar development designed to have an export capacity of just over 20 megawatts. The site has secured a grid connection with a peak export capacity of 16.3 megawatts. This is the maximum amount of power the solar system will be able to provide to the grid at any one time. It is common with solar developments of this nature for projects to be designed with a larger capacity. This is done to ensure that during times of cloudier weather, and especially in the mornings and evenings, the site will still be able to generate a good amount of power and keep exporting the 16.3 megawatts for longer. As explained yesterday, the site benefits from a grid connection within the site with no off-site works required. Next slide, please. This next slide is taken from Google Earth and shows the wider surrounding area, which is mostly rural. The site is identified in red. Members will note the Hereford Railway line, which passes along the northern boundary of the site, and the River Froome, which meanders through the landscape and also passes along the northern boundary. The site is primarily flat and sits within a broad valley, which has been shaped by the river. The notable ridgeline of Shucknall Hill lies to the north and Seager Hill to the south. The small settlement of Stoke Edith is located 950 metres to the south of the site, with Weston Begard to the west and Yarkhill to the northwest. The site itself, 29.2 hectares of agricultural land across 4 irregular shaped arable fields, outlined by hedgerows, tree bouts and a small block of woodland. 2 overhead power lines pass through the site from east to west, and it is these which will provide the on-site connection to the wider grid. Next slide, please. This next slide identifies the site context and constraints within the local area. The site is not within a designated landscape. However, the River Froome is identified as a site of interest for nature conservation. The application also identifies it as providing a central green link through the site. The Registered Park and Garden of Stoke Edith is in close proximity to the south of the site and is shown on the plan in shaded purple. There are a number of listed buildings within the surrounding area, and this includes the Grade 1 listed Church of St Mary's at Stoke Edith, which members were able to identify yesterday by its spire and is visible within the wider landscape. There is also several public right-of-ways within the wider landscape, especially on the higher ground. Of particular note is public footpath SE1 to the south, which passes through the registered park and garden. I'd also draw members' attention to that part of the site is also within flood zone 3. Next slide, please. This next slide shows photos taken from within the site. The top left looking west across the site towards Dormington, the top right looking towards the railway and Shucknall Hill. The bottom left is taken from the adjoining highway when stood on top of the railway bridge looking down across the site, and the bottom right is looking south towards Stoke Edith Registered Park and Garden. Next slide, please. This next slide shows the proposed layout of the development. The development consists of solar arrays spanning across the 4 fields. In total, the development has been designed with 34,046 solar panels, which will all feed into a number of transformers, which will connect to the proposed substation positioned close to the site entrance. Members will note that the application has been supported with a whole suite of technical reports, which have informed the proposed layout and design of the scheme. This includes a glint and glare study, which has examined the potential for reflection from the proposed panels on residential dwellings, roads and the adjoining railway. As a result of the study, members will note that the orientation of the panels in the fields which adjoin the railway do not face directly south. The panels have been positioned at a 15-degree angle to the west to ensure views of the panels from the railway are not geometrically possible. The layout of the scheme fits within the existing field structure, whilst also avoiding the power lines which cross the site. Next slide, please. This next slide details the solar arrays themselves. The solar panels are to be mounted on steel frames and positioned in rows in an east to west orientation to face south at a 15-degree angle. The front lower edge of the frame will be 0.9 metres above the ground, with a maximum of 2.9 metres to the rear upper edge. Each module will have a width of 6.9 metres, with lengths varying across the site to fit with the existing fields. A total of 46 inverters are to be positioned on the back side of the arrays, which will change the direct current electricity captured by the solar panels into an alternating current. Next slide, please. As part of the proposal, a distribution network operator substation is proposed, where the energy will be transmitted into the national grid. The compound is to be located north of the access where members parked yesterday, close to the point of connection to the national grid. The proposed compound is to be surrounded by a 2.4 metre high security fence with an additional 1.2 metre high stop-proof fence, as the applicant intends to graze sheep under the panels. The infrastructure inside the compound will not exceed 5.6 metres. Next slide, please. This next slide identifies the site access. The proposed development will utilise a single point of access using the existing field gate into the site, which is to be upgraded. The majority of the traffic associated with the development will be during the construction, which is identified as taking between 48 to 50 weeks. There is a variety of vehicles which will be used during the construction, which includes HGVs. To accommodate these vehicles, 4 metres of hedgerow either side of the access will be removed to achieve this suitable visibility splays. A new hedgerow will be planted outside of the visibility splay also. The transport statement submitted in support of the application outlines that a banksman will be used to aid HGV deliveries into the site, with all deliveries into the site approaching from the south and traffic leaving also directed back to the south. Members will note conditions for a construction and environmental management plan prior to the commencement of the development, which will ensure no adverse impacts upon highway safety or residential amenity occur during the construction. Next slide, please. This next slide identifies the key material planning considerations and issues with the proposed developments. Firstly is that of the support for renewable energy and addressing climate change. National and local planning policy is overwhelmingly supportive of renewable energy developments, and therefore the in-principle acceptability of the proposed development is well established. The proposed development would make a significant contribution to meeting the government's targets for all electricity generation to be zero carbon by 2035 and help to achieve the overall goal of net zero emissions by 2050. The policies in the Western Begard and Yark Hill neighbourhood development plans relating to renewable energy schemes are recognised and have been fully considered. The proposal does represent a large-scale commercially led renewable scheme. However, in recognition of its scale, the application has been supported with a range of detailed technical studies assessing all of the key issues and potential environmental impacts. The next key issue is that of the loss of agricultural land. The application has been supported with a Soils and Agricultural Land Quality Report, which, following surveys within the site, identified the land as being Grade 3B, and as such, it is not considered to be the best and most versatile agricultural land. The proposal therefore satisfies both local and national policy, which advises that proposals on greenfield land should be directed to poorer quality land. The proposal does retain an element of agricultural use, with sheep being grazed when feasible and wildflowers, grassland planted across the site. The proposal is also considered to represent a temporary use of the land, with the land capable of returning to agriculture once the solar development is removed. The next issue is in terms of ecology and biodiversity. The application again has been supported with an ecological impact assessment which identifies that the habitats to be lost to the development are largely that of the agricultural land. The assessment concludes that the proposal will not impact upon any designated sites, and new hedgerow and tree planting around the site will have a positive effect by reducing the potential nitrate discharge into the River Frome from agriculture. The planning ecologist has identified that the proposal will not have an impact on the River Frome. However, a condition requiring a construction environmental management plan is recommended to ensure the construction will not impact on the river. There is also conditions relating to landscape details and maintenance which will support the development of riverbank habitats and ensure that a buffer zone of native vegetation along the riverbank is maintained throughout the operation of the development. Overall, the ecologist has identified that the proposed development will deliver positive effects to identified ecological features, with a 45% biodiversity net gain in habitat units and 23% gain in hedgerow units. The next impact is that of highways. In terms of the highways impact, the application proposes to upgrade the existing field entrance. Taking into account the details contained within the transport statement, the highways impact of the development are not considered to be at a level that represents severe harm, and the mitigation proposed can be secured through the planning conditions to ensure the construction traffic can be accommodated safely on the local highway network. The next key issue is that of flood risk and drainage. The application is partially located within Flood Zone 3, which is the high-risk zone. In accordance with the EA standing advice, the application has been supported with a flood risk assessment. During the application process, in consultation with the Environment Agency, the applicants revised the flood risk assessment and hydraulic modelling report, which resulted in the conclusion that the development will result in a relatively minor increase in flood levels within the site boundary. However, this will not alter or change the hazard class rating. Solar developments such as that proposed are classed as essential infrastructure, which are not inappropriate in flood zones, subject to consideration of the sequential and exception tests. The proposed substation is identified as being in Flood Zone 1. In accordance with paragraph 178 of the MPPF, the proposal is considered to pass the exception test as it provides a wider sustainability benefit to the community in the form of renewable energy that outweighs the flood risk and has been designed to be safe for its lifetime without increasing flooding elsewhere. The Environment Agency and Council Drainage Engineers have supported the application subject to conditions. This includes a condition relating to surface water prevention during construction and flood storage compensation. Next slide, please. Moving on to the next key issue, which is the visual impact of the development and its impact on the landscape character, which has been widely recognised and identified in all the representations from members of the public. This slide identifies the landscape strategy for the development, which was developed following the completion of a landscape and visual impact assessment, which carried out an assessment of the landscape character type and its susceptibility and sensitivity to the proposed development. An assessment of the likely views of the development from 12 viewpoints at both local and medium distance views were also provided. The proposal does not change the topography of the site and retains and enhances the structure of the landscape. The proposed landscape strategy combines the reinforcement of existing vegetation and the introduction of a new landscape mitigation, providing green buffers to the site boundaries and within the centre of the site. The objective of the landscape strategy is to help break up the potential massing of the proposed development and provide enhanced screening of the development in mid-range views, especially when viewed from the south and the public footpaths in Stoke Edith, which are located on elevated landform. The assessment identified that beyond the site and its immediate setting, some adverse effects on the local and wider scale landscape character and visual receptors are likely to arise at year 1 of the development. However, by year 15, when the proposed landscape strategy has established, these effects will be reduced, with views across the site filtered and interrupted by planting. Conditions have been included in the recommendation for a fully detailed hardened landscaping details to be provided, as well as a landscape management plan. Next slide, please. This following slide is of the photographs taken from the landscape visual impact assessment along the footpath to the south on elevated land. The top photo shows the baseline condition, with the middle photograph showing the development at year 1, and the bottom photograph at year 15 once the planting has been established. The development will still be partially visible, but the planting will break up the massing and soften the visual impact by year 15. Next slide, please. These next photos are taken from the A438 to the south, looking north back to the development. At year 1, the western part of the development will be visible in almost one mass. However, by year 15, although there are still glimpses, the tree planting, once established, breaks up this view. From the north on Shucknall Hill, the majority of the views are from private residential dwellings, with the public footpaths within the woodland and views obscured from existing vegetation. Overall, it is recognised that there will be a localised visual impact associated with the development. The development, by its very nature, has an industrial appearance and would be at odds with the existing rural character. Therefore, the harm to the landscape character and visual amenity does attract weight in the assessment of the proposal. Next slide, please. Moving on to the final key issue which has been considered, and that is the impact on the heritage assets. This slide identifies the location of the Stoke Edith Registered Park and Garden in relation to the site, as well as the listed buildings and scheduled monuments in the local area. The solar farm would not impinge directly on any of these heritage assets. Any harm to the significance of the assets concerned derives from a change in views to or from an area that lies within their setting. As such, it is only the part of the significance derived from the setting that is affected. The application has been supported with a historic environmental assessment, and within my report I have given commentary on the listings and considered the impact the wider landscape has on them. The applicant's assessment identifies that the development will not close off views into or out of the gardens, with views from the gardens towards the north largely unchanged. The assessment has concluded that the effects on the setting of the garden is less than substantial, of which the council's historic building officer agrees with. The historic building officer also regards the impact on the setting of the Church of St Mary to be less than substantial, given its relationship with the garden and being situated in the centre of the registered park and garden, albeit not within the designated area itself. The presence and visibility of the proposal would not alter the overall design intent of the design landscape, nor the understanding and experience of the spatial and visual relationships between the church and the registered park and garden. The harm is therefore considered to be less than substantial and at the lower end of that spectrum. This needs to be considered against the public benefits in the planning balance. Next slide, please. Moving on to the planning balance and to conclude. There is an urgent need for energy from renewable sources in order to achieve carbon reduction targets, and a major contribution is expected to come from solar developments. The proposal would provide a renewable form of energy for a significant number of homes, and importantly, the grid connection offer would enable the site to contribute at an early date to renewable generation. The key role for solar development and the contribution which the application site could make at an early stage are factors which carry substantial weight in support of the proposal. I also give significant weight to the role which the development would play in helping to improve energy security. The proposal has been considered in the context of the presumption in favour of sustainable development as set out by paragraph 11 of the NPPF, and has been given full regard to the tilted balance, which directs that permission should be granted unless the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. Whilst it is recognised that the scale of the development cannot be classed as small scale, the level of harm to the setting of the designated heritage assets and landscape character identified is considered to be outweighed by the public benefits of the development. Chief of these being the contribution of the proposal towards the generation of renewable energy. The resultant reduction in greenhouse gas emissions and energy security benefits all attract significant weight. This, along with the moderate weight for the benefits to the local economy and biodiversity, would, in officers' judgment, outweigh the harm identified. Drawing all the considerations together and having regard to the tilted balance as required by the NPPF, it is concluded that the planning balance falls in favour of the proposed development. The proposal is considered to accord with the development plan taken as a whole and is consistent with the NPPF. Officers have taken into account all other matters raised in representations received from consultees, but have found nothing of sufficient weight to alter conclusions. As such, the application is recommended for approval, subject to the conditions set out in the report. Thank you.
Thank you for a very thorough presentation. Can I now invite Mrs. Fenton to speak on behalf of Weston Begard Parish Council? You have 3 minutes.
The importance of renewable energy is acknowledged, but planning decisions must reflect a balanced interpretation of policy. Here, paragraph 11 of the NPPF is key. Paragraph 11 introduces the tilted balance, but it is not a green light for every solar scheme. It is conditional, and this application fails on both key tests. First, the officer's report accepts there would be harm to designated heritage assets, and under paragraph 11DI, that alone disapplies the presumption in favour of development. It directly conflicts with national heritage policy. Second, even if the tilted balance applied, the harm to landscape heritage setting and agricultural land is not significantly and demonstrably outweighed by public benefit, as required by paragraph 11D.2. This is not a modest proposal. It spans 4 fields, includes over 34,000 panels, fencing, substations, 8 transformers and 46 inverters, effectively industrialising open countryside. The site lies in a prominent valley that contributes to local landscape character and is enjoyed daily by walkers, cyclists and visitors. These are not hidden views, but ones that help define Herefordshire's rural identity and economy. Importantly, both Yarkhill and Weston Begard neighbourhood development plans only supported renewable energy where harm is avoided. Here, harm is real, visible and enduring. Engage in paragraph 11C. Permission should be refused on local plan grounds. NDPs carry statutory weight under the Localism Act and should not be set aside lightly. The site also lies in flood zones 2 and 3, with a large section in zone 3B, functional floodplain. The NPPF 2025 paragraph 174 is clear. The sequential test must steer development to areas of lowest flood risks. Yet, no alternative site comparison is detailed. There is no area of search, no matrix, no transparent justification. And Herefordshire offers multiple brownfield or lower risk options. This undermines the sequential test, which has not been robustly or transparently applied. The clustering of 3 large solar farms, because 2 others have been given planning approval, within a 3 to 4 kilometre radius, totalling 140 hectares, nearly 200 football pitches, would exemplify rural industrialisation. Nationally, Grid capacity is under severe strain, with connections currently delayed. Ofgem and Western Power Distribution have previously reported grid saturation in rural and semi-rural locations. So by committing limited grid capacity to another
I'm afraid I'm
solar
going to
scheme-
ask you to
Can I just
finish
finish
it.
this last paragraph?
Well,
Are we at risk of jeopardising future housing allocations as we limit ability to connect new homes without major infrastructure upgrades? Thank you.
can I ask Mr. Breeze, a local resident, to speak in objection to the application? You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I should say that I have first-hand experience of climate measurements, and so no one is more aware than I am of the need for reducing carbon emissions and for renewable energy. But there's one big problem. The solar panels must be in the right place. Now, don't take my word for it. Some of you, perhaps in the Green Party, will know about James Lovelock, a senior climate scientist. And he, if you read his work, he is totally opposed to the use of agricultural land for renewable energy, such as these solar panels. The other thing, we hear a lot about how much energy is being generated. But if you look in the back of your iPhone, you will see solar radiation, hours of sunlight, and you will see that in the winter, over Christmas, you have very short days. And I can tell you that on Christmas Day, you're lucky to get 100 watts per square metre on your solar panels for a couple of hours. So although we're told how much energy this is going to generate, it's not generated at a time when we need it. We need to heat our homes, and electricity demand by local people will be most in the winter when your solar panels are doing nothing. Now, I would advocate that the council checks some of these figures we are given for energy against the actual figures for the site. Hereford has a bit of a quirky climate in that during the summer it's very wet. Well, it hasn't been this summer, but many summers, and it is cloudy. And I have seen climate data for Hereford because I worked in agricultural research. I've seen climate data for Herefordshire, and it is not typical of the rest of the country. That is actually why it's so productive, because it's a bit wet in the summer. And you also need to check whether the long-term output by these sites is what it is claimed, because the panels will get dirty, they will degrade. So don't take data which are derived from some laboratory measurement under ideal conditions for working in 10 years' time. So that's the immediate problems, but what about the future of this site? We're told that it can be reclaimed to agricultural land. My first job was to work on a site of a chemical works which was dumped on a council because they couldn't afford to reclaim it. We don't want in 25 years' time to be staring at a site when the owners say that they can't afford to reclaim it and so have got to put houses on it. So I think the council needs to have some sort of assurance that there really can be reclamation and restoration of this site at the end of its useful time. Moving on to biodiversity.
Sorry, Mr. Breeze, you've gone over 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
Can I just say, does the Hereford Council want to see the countryside turned into industrial park? I think not.
Move to Mr. Clements, who, on behalf of the applicant, to speak. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chair and members, for the opportunity to speak in support of the proposed development and for joining me on site yesterday. Today I'll talk about the development in general and then cover some specific planning points. Firstly, the development overall. We're delighted to be working alongside the Council and we're grateful for the way officers have proactively and fairly dealt with matters. The site is ideally suited to solar. The favourable on-site grid connection means we can supply renewable energy and save carbon with consultees such as the EA and Natural England and consulted neighbouring parishes to ensure any specific concerns are gathered.
This has resulted in the recommendation before you today. The officer's report is thoughtfully written and reflects the extensive efforts by all sides. The report acknowledges that there may be localised change, but the significant benefits must also be considered. Hence the clear recommendation for an approval, which is in line with the local plan and national policy. Turning now to a couple of points raised today. The detailed landscape and visual impact assessment gathered and measured views of the site and informed the landscape strategy plan, which will fully mitigate these views by year 15. After discussions with the EA, the approach ensures flood risk is fully mitigated and flood compensatory storage can improve drainage capacity in the area. The layout provides sufficient standoff to the river and watercourses. The site is graded at 3B agricultural land, which is not the best and most versatile land. The temporary solar use alongside sheep grazing ensures we generate some small benefit in agricultural terms. The transport statement shows the vehicle route, which was met with nods of approval on yesterday's site visit. Overall, the well-written officer report is clear. The significant benefit outweighs limited harm and planning permission should be granted. We hope members can follow that recommendation. Thank you.
Thank you. If now the speakers could return to the public gallery, please. Right, we'll now move on to the local member, who is Councillor Lester, for this ward. He speaks and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate. He does not have a vote. You have 10 minutes, Mr.
Thank you. Chairman, I'm not going to take 10 minutes. But firstly, my apologies for not attending the site visit yesterday, which I heard that you found was very informative. When I was told that this application was coming to committee, when Councillor Powell, nor I, nor Councillor Biggs were available, I asked for this committee agenda item to be deferred to the next planning committee. But it appears that the wishes of the applicant are more important than the communities that I serve. I, as ward councillor, is supposed to say something really eloquent in expressing my views on the matter, but you've already heard two objectors that are far more eloquent than me in expressing their concerns about the nature of this application. I was emailed by a key architect of Weston Begard Parish Council at the time, and he was a key architect, of the NDP, and he emailed me and he said, to approve this application would be to send a direct signal to the citizens of Herefordshire that NDPs are not worth the paper they are written on. So this application before you gives a green light to such developments because of concern for the environment. So solar panels apparently are better than agriculture because there are less phosphates. I cannot accept that this is a tenable position for us to take. So how ironic is it that the attitude is that we've got to protect our environment, but that flies in the face of protecting our farmland, our green and pleasant land, and our land that is set aside to grow food. Instead, the proposal is to put 3-metre high structures that will scar the landscape. Both Weston Begard Parish Council and Yarkhill Parish Council have very eloquently set out their objections, but I think it's really telling that this is an application for nearly 30 hectares, and there was an application that was refused not long ago for 10 hectares, and the planning officer said the proposed development of 10 hectares of solar panels on the application site would result in a development that would have substantial harm to the landscape character by virtue of the scale and pattern of development that lacks any relationship with existing development and would have a detrimental impact that is out of keeping and does not respect the form, character and setting of the locality. The size, the scale, the nature of the proposal would result in a dominant and uncharacteristic form of development, which introduces a series of uncharacteristic structures across open fields, together with the security fencing and cameras causing unacceptable visual harm to the landscape character and appearance of the wider landscape setting. So this decision this application was refused, and it was heard at appeal, and the appeal inspector said the site is part of an intimate and most attractive landscape that has a strong sense of scale and visual unity, and in my view is sensitive to change. Into this setting, the appeal proposal would introduce a fairly sizable solar farm, 10 hectares, and associated infrastructure, despite the density of hedging and other vegetation on the site boundaries, which would thin out significantly over the autumn and winter months. 25 years is a significant period of time during which the impact of the scheme on landscape character would be experienced. At close range, it would be significantly harmed by ranks of solar panels and the utilitarian inverter stations. The stark semi-industrial appearance of the installation would be intrusive and markedly out of character with the tract of the scenic countryside, disrupting the harmonious pattern of open fields and eroding the qualities of the principal settled farmlands landscape type. And you've heard from Councillor Fenton just some moments ago the fact that this area seems to be inundated with solar panels. This is a step too far. It's not protecting the environment, it's harming our environment, and I cannot support this application. And I ask the Planning Committee to give serious consideration to that point of view. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. And now I invite debate. Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Can I first of all thank Ms. Genman for her very comprehensive report and her detailed presentation at the site visit yesterday. It was all very useful. I was encouraged to hear that there's been a glint and glare assessment. I think that's a wonderful phrase. I'm going to remember that. But of course, these are fixed panels, 2 meters plus high, and the sun moves around, or rather the earth moves in relation to the sun. I'm wondering whether or not there are certain times of the year where there could be glint and glare. I don't know, but I'm sure engineers have investigated those possibilities. This could be seen to be a necessary evil, these particular types of panels. And one of the speakers mentioned the fact that they couldn't be profitable in a climate such as ours. But of course, the developers wouldn't have planned to install them if there was going to be no profit. And we're told that they will last for 40 years, not 20. Bodnam and Marden parishes have a large solar panel development on their boundary, and they actually receive a payment from the owners of this site on a regular basis. I'm wondering whether the parishes of Weston Begard and Yarkhill will benefit from this, and I think some sort of conversation with the developers could be financially useful. This is, in my view, an ideal location if we got to have these things. There's no residential development close by. There will be sheep grazing within the panels, which will hopefully remove or reduce the industrial impact of this particular site. And I've got no actual concerns with it, and I support the officer's recommendation for approval. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Foxton.
Thank you for a comprehensive presentation and all the detail and yesterday's visit with all the information. Now, this extensive site, this location, is part of a highly valued landscape. Hereford is a farming county, and what we are considering is a large industrial development. We already have 2 sites of solar panels nearby, Dormington and West Hyde, We don't need further blots on the landscape. It makes no sense to have solar panels on land that is so susceptible to flooding. Water and electricity are known not to mix. The application is partly located in flood zone 3, which is a high-risk zone. The panels will need to be raised because of flood risk. Now, site access. The road is a busy cut-through between the A4103 and the 483. There are very deep ancient ditches either side of the road where a car veering off the road can slip down deep into the ditch and be unnoticed. I've actually seen that on a number of occasions. The road, they slip down like a small package and you can literally drive past and not see them. The road is narrow and admittedly the bends help to slow down the traffic. Vehicles pass and I believe the narrow road will struggle to cope with heavy delivery lorries. Now, rest assured, I am hugely supportive of solar panels. I have 10 large solar panels on the roof of my house. Solar panels should be on the roof of houses, hospitals, office blocks, in fact, as many buildings as possible. Railway embankments and cuttings where they are more discreet. This application is much more than a blot on the landscape. To quote King Charles, it's a monstrous carbuncle on the face of a much-loved friend. I believe this planning application to be a crime against the environment. Humanity lived for many thousands of years without electricity, but dies within weeks without food. In 1939, at the outbreak of the Second World War, the expression "dig for victory" was widely broadcast, so every square foot of land could grow food to fight the war. In today's new, dangerous age, where we are again spending more money preparing to deter war, we, above all, need food security on the British Isles. Hence, I believe, solar panels waste many hectares of vital land that must be used for food production. Thank you.
Thank you. Now, Councillor Simmons. Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you very much to Rebecca for her site visit and her report, very comprehensive, setting out the issues. And also thank you particularly to Mrs Fenton for her very clear and impassioned explanation of why we should look again at this proposal. I am very much in favour of renewable energy generation per se. I do, however, have a real issue with, as has been expressed already, use of greenfield sites to locate solar panels when we have large areas. It has been explained already of brownfield land or roofs. I do appreciate that the connections here are what driving this with the linear development of the power lines. I am struggling with it. I think that I would like to understand a bit more about Mrs Fenton's reference to the sequential test, which was covered a little bit in the report, but I would like to understand from the case officer a bit more about that, please. I would also like to just discuss the applicant's own LVIA View 5 shows that even after 15 years, the visibility of the site remains, and you will see the solar panels. I am concerned about the sort of clustering effect, but I do understand there isn't the intervisibility in a cumulative sense with the other schemes, but it does impact on the landscape character of the area because of that clustering. Ultimately, although it may not impact on cumulative views, it does impact cumulatively on the landscape character. I appreciate the number of conditions that have been put in with regard to, for example, mammal gates, but I did raise on site yesterday, and I welcome the addition in the update and the schedule of updates about setting back as per the internal drainage board's requirement for 9 metres. I do, however, just want to raise the issue that although you may be setting that back 9 metres, that may, particularly on the northern boundary of the site, the north sort of western part of the boundary, where the solar panels are very close to the river, that may have the unintended consequence of leading to clearance of some of the green natural environment there along the riparian habitat of the riverbank, to enable that clearance, to enable access by vehicles to maintain that fencing. So I don't know how we address this. I don't know if it's through the CEMP, where we have said that we will not allow damage to any of the kind of green existing environmental buffer there. Because at the moment, I don't see how you square that circle unless you can move the solar panels or remove them, particularly where there's the pinch point along the northwestern part of that boundary. And I'd like some explanation of that if possible, please. The other thing that I'm sort of picking up now is looking at the plans as put by the applicant. There doesn't appear to be any screening of the substation and the inverters, etc., in close proximity to the road. You know, it would be very industrial looking. There doesn't seem to be any screening of that because of the expansion of the splay area for visibility. Is there any way that we can put a condition around there to additional planting to try and screen to some extent that awful industrial scale part there that's in very close proximity to the road and will be quite high and obvious? I think that's what I can add at the moment. I'd like to hear more about the debate. Thank you.
Thank you. Do you back at this stage about the issues raised
Yeah,
there?
no, I can come back on a few points. I just want to check, in terms of that sequential test, you asked for clarification, and I believe that's in relation to paragraph 11 of the NPPF, in terms of that tilted balance and the weight that we give to the public benefits against the harm which was identified. Is that correct?
I think it's in that we're basically saying we can set aside the sequential test because of that balance, and therefore
I don't think I have set it aside in terms of what
I think it's the evidence we're looking for as was requested. Is that
the evidence in terms of the public benefits?
No, the evidence in that the sequential test of where other sites, etc., have been considered.
Okay, so in terms of looking for alternative sites, the NPPF doesn't require us. So in terms of this project, it's nature, which is renewable energy. It doesn't require us to look for alternative sites. In terms of that sequential test, different to if it was if we were just looking at development within a flood zone. That's not, because it is.
It's energy generation rather than for housing or something. Right, I'm with you. Okay, thank you.
Is that okay? Then you mentioned about the 9 metre easement and the buffer. There is conditions as part of the recommendation in terms of that landscape maintenance, and also further details in terms of the landscape scheme, which will look to ensure that in terms of the riverbank there is vegetation along that riverbank. I do understand, and I have recognised that there is a pinch point on that northern boundary. There's certainly one pinch point, and we will be checking that those conditions will enable us to check, first of all, that vegetation can, and those habitats which we're looking to secure can be achieved, and then we can also look at in terms of that maintenance, because I understand the concern is that when the applicant or the landowner do go on, especially after a flood event, and they do go on to remove any debris or to ensure, in terms of just general maintenance, it's ensuring that those vehicles or any equipment doesn't impact upon those habitats which have established. So I think we can pick that up within the conditions, especially the landscape maintenance condition, but also work it into those further details as well, because I think it's key, and we can ensure that those distances are achieved, if not further distances, if required.
Okay, I appreciate that. And with regard to my point about the substation,
So in terms of the screening of the substation, I think I identified that there is a 2.4 metre high security fence, and that the maximum height of the infrastructure will be 5.66 metres. So it is recognised that is quite a substantial height. and also identified where that's going to be experienced, especially along the highway, because it does sit within the highway, and especially if you're approaching the site from the north, you go over that railway bridge, so you're almost looking down upon it. The landscape strategy does look to reinforce that boundary with the highway, in terms of gapping up hedgerows, but also providing further planting. And we will look to ensure, again, through the landscape maintenance, we'll look at the height of how it is measured in terms of those hedgerows. But I think there's also room around the substation itself. There is room that we can require additional planting. We have to be careful, or they have to be careful, that any landscape proposed doesn't impact on the power lines which cross the site. Also, so there are other factors which will feed into that further detailed landscape strategy which will come in, but I think certainly there is room to provide further landscaping around the substation to help with those visual impacts.
Thank you. Just one point. I mean, it's been suggested that we should be using brownfield sites, bearing in mind that we're led to believe that we have insufficient brownfield sites to meet our housing targets. I thought that would be slightly academic anyway. So anyway, can I now, Councillor Thomas?
There's a famous line in a hymn we all know, "Our green and pleasant land." I realise we have to have these, but not on this scale, not in this position. The only consolation to me is it is on grade 3B land. Being an ex-farmer, I know you can probably grow a field of wheat on that, but not many other crops. It was originally a hop field, by the way. I really do have a problem with these very large solar panels. There's one very close to me, about 2 miles away. That's built on grade 1 and 2 land, which should never have happened, but anyway, we've got them. We have so many, in fact, only, quarter of a mile from that site is a very large industrial complex. You could put them on the roofs there. That would cover several acres. I'm minded that they should be on all roofs. All our plans now should include photovoltaic panels on our roofs. You can do slates, so you don't need to have these ugly panels. But I don't think that they should be in fields. The field, just because it can be grazed with sheep, I still don't think that's a good thing. This is part of our security, which I'm afraid I don't particularly like, and I shall be voting against it for that reason.
Can I say, you know, voting against it on the principle you don't like it is not the grounds for refusal, bearing in mind that the previous government and this government are in favour of the principle of solar panels and open countryside. I don't like it, but I'm afraid we've got to accept that is the policy nationally. So, can I now, Councillor Harvey, please?
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, this is a bit of a Goldilocks. There's some good bits to it, and there's some not so good bits to it. I think for me, I'm reassured to hear that there may be scope to deal with some of the concerns about clearing debris after flooding, and making sure that there isn't damage to habitat in the way that the tracks are laid down. I think that's good news. I'd be keen to be assured that there seem to be concerns that still exist from the heritage comments that have come in about the location. And yes, we do have 2 large solar farms that have already been approved in the area, because we have that massive transformer station at Dormington, which is an important infrastructure node, which means that locations close by can actually feed their electricity generated onto the grid. And I think that is something to consider, that not everywhere where panels could be put in locations which people might feel are more appropriate, have the grid infrastructure to enable those farms to be located there. So there is an accident of circumstance that needs to be recognised and considered. I think solar does form part of the national energy generation mix. It's not going to be as effective in the winter as it is in the summer. And obviously, equally, neither does the wind blow all the time for wind farms. But, it is part of the energy mix, and it is part of an increasingly complex energy picture that we all need to recognise is slightly more difficult to juggle than fossil fuels have been for us in the past. I'm interested to see that there were some concerns raised by the environmental team about noise and particularly low frequency associated with the transformers. Coming from Ledbury, we've certainly had our issues with low frequency noise generation and its impact on homes and houses. It says in the report that there is a noise impact assessment that's been done. I haven't been able to find it on the website, but that might be my bad. I have done a bit of a poke around and haven't been able to come across it. So I'd like some assurance from officers that A, it does actually exist, and B, that it meets the BS 4142 standard that our officers were requiring. And if not, can that please be included as a condition, because I couldn't see it in the conditions either. And obviously low frequency because it hugs the ground and travels long distances. We all know how far in our oceans whale song can be heard. So it is important to make sure that we're not creating low frequency noise nuisance. I think people in Leominster are still suffering from the hum, that the Leominster hum that occurs at certain times of the year or times of the night. And it is a problem where it occurs. I think for me, on balance, with the assurances that I'm seeking, if they can be delivered, I'm probably in favour of supporting this, but I'm not wild about it.
Councillor Andrews, followed by Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Chairman. Having been on this committee a long time, I can remember the outcry when we had polytunnels covering vast quantities of green areas. But polytunnels do have one singular advantage. They're removed after a few years. Now, this very large solar farm was stuck with it for 40 years, apparently, which will outlive all of us, I would have thought, here. But I would have to say, I think the single advantage, or the only advantage of this site, appears to be that it's flat. Yes, but it can be seen from all the hills on the surrounding areas. I know we've got to, as has been so eloquently said by Councillor Harvey, spread our power sources or generation from different areas, wind farms, solar farms. But I really do feel that this is a large site in perhaps the wrong place. Thank you.
Councillor Woodall.
Thank you, Chair. I've got sort of four things. The first one, sort of in line with what Mr. Greaves was saying, we've got statements saying that the land is capable of returning to agricultural use. And then later, I think in the conditions, you put in the scheme shall make provision for the removal and reuse of solar panels and all other associated equipment and the subsequent restoration of the site. So does that, just to clarify, the scheme shall make provision, does that mean that the applicant is responsible for making sure there is funds to pay for the complete removal at the end of 39 years and 6 months, or whenever within that 39 months they no longer find maybe economically viable, they might decide to abandon it. Maybe the National Grid changes its regulations, something happens, and they no longer have to use that site. It could be after only 20 years. It could be after some new technical development. So can that provision be invoked by the planning enforcement team when necessary? So that was my first one. Should you want me to go on, or do you want to take that one?
Just go on and get the
Next one, thank you. Get them over with. Get them over with. Second one, you said that we're talking about harm versus benefit. And one of the things, I don't know if you meant it this way, but you said it would be of benefit to the community because of electricity or generation of solar power. But that's going into the national grid. I mean, I'm sure if the 3 or 4 settlements surrounding that national grid found they had free electricity for the next 40 years, it would probably sail through. It would probably be a lot easier. But no, that is not, the community is not the local people. It's going to be of benefit to the public in general, I believe. Is that what you meant when you meant benefit to the community? You actually meant benefit to the national requirement grid. So that's the second one. Third one, we saw some pictures about how after 15 years the trees would mature, the hedgerows would mature, and so on. But in the, I think, yes, in the landscape maintenance conditions, you said before the development is first brought into use, a landscape management and maintenance plan for a period of 10 years shall be submitted and approved. So once again, if after 10 years, we've still got another 30 years, of vegetation, of life for that field. What happens after 10 years to the maintenance of the hedgerows, the trees, the land, the clearance of the flooding? Who pays for that? Is it Herefordshire Council that is responsible for that? Is it the RLIDB? Is it Environment England, and so on? So at the end of 10 years, I'd like to know who's responsible for the maintenance of those trees and hedgerows. And then finally, as brought up by the RLIDB, it's going to take, and I think it was mentioned yesterday when we went on site, and thank you very much for that site visit. It's a beautiful area. It would take approximately 1 year to build out, to fully, get it all functional. I don't know whether that means they can't switch it on until the years aren't, or whether they have to incrementally increase the number of solar panels and inverters and all that sort of stuff. But during that 1 year construction, there's going to be a lot of runoff. There's going to be a lot of disturbance to the soil. That's going into the Froome, that's going into the brooks, and that's going to be a huge increase in the amount of silt. And we've experienced this in many of building developments. I'm sure we've all experienced where you get the red soil, the red silt, and it clogs everything up, the drains, the roads, everything downhill basically gets clogged up. So what provision, and I couldn't see a specific condition on that about construction, the impact of construction over a period of a year. And finally, just for everyone else, just an interesting stat. So those are my 4. Final statistic, apparently we need 90 gigawatts of solar power to make the UK self-sustaining in energy generation. That is 0.39% of the land. Less than 1%, less than 0.5% of the land of the UK is required, and that would make us independent, resilient. The golf courses in this country occupy 0.54%. We have got more golf courses in land worth than we have with solar power. So just to put it in relation. But sorry, thank you, Planning Officer. Rebecca, if you've got any responses to those 4, thank you.
Yeah, I will try and answer the 4 of them. So your first point was in terms of what happens when the solar panels or the solar developments cease. There's 2 conditions. There's condition 4 is the cease of operation. So that first condition under condition 4, that reads if the solar farm permitted ceases to operate for a continuous period of 12 months, then a scheme for decommissioning and removal of the solar farms and ancillary equipment shall be submitted. That condition, it's a fairly standard condition, which is certainly I've seen on a number of appeal decisions. So that's to capture if any time in that 40 years it ceases to operate, our planning enforcement team can go in and insist that the site is restored to agriculture. And then you've got condition 5. So if it does run for the 40 years, condition 5, it requires, so within 6 months of those, well, 6 months or 39 years, 6 months, that we also have that details come in to and ensure to ensure that we have those details in terms of it being restored and making sure that all the equipment go off site. I think you raised the point in terms of who funds that. Or who's responsible for that. It will be the landowner, as with any planning permission. The planning permission goes with the landowner. It's with all these schemes, the energy companies might change as the applicant might move on and sell the land on, but the permission will stay with the land. So whoever owns the land at the time, they will be responsible for implementing those conditions. The second point you made was in relation to the benefit to the local community. The benefits are to the public rather than to the local community. On other schemes that we've dealt with in terms of Dormington, there has been benefits to the local community offered up as part of the application. Those benefits happen outside of the planning process. So in terms of the planning application, the parish councils are encouraged to engage with, and as the applicant are also encouraged to engage with the local parish councils. And I do know in Dormington it works quite effectively in terms of the benefits that the local community has seen by working with the solar farm at Dormington. But that happens outside of the planning application itself. The third point you raised was in relation to the landscape. You highlighted one of the conditions in terms of the landscape maintenance, which I'll just find it now in terms of the number. It's condition number 13, landscape maintenance. That 10 years, it should read 30 years. That's my mistake, and I apologise. The 30 years is required by the environmental bill, so we can have that amended to the 30 years. Again, I would make the point in terms of who's responsible for the landscape the maintenance. That condition and the planning permission will stay with the landowner. So whoever's owns the land at the time is responsible for ensuring that these conditions are complied with. The fourth point you raised was in relation to the runoff during construction. There is a condition, it's condition 10. Condition 10 requires, relates to surface water during construction. That condition was at the request of the Environment Agency. They requested that condition be implemented to ensure that the construction of the development does not increase flood risk elsewhere or contribute to water pollution. Hopefully that's answered the four.
Right. Just one point I wanted to raise. I should have raised it earlier. In your presentation, gentlemen, you had the 2-year, 5-year and 15-year photographs. I couldn't see any difference between any of them. They looked identical, the photographs.
Vegetation.
Is it possible to bring those up? I mean, whether it's relevant or not, but I looked very hard and I could not see any difference between the 3 photographs. Yes. Okay. Sorry to throw this at you.
Yes, there's certainly the one that you've got on the screen now is from the public footpath. I think what the point highlighted probably is that these views are at some distance. You are looking down across the site. I'm not sure if it's possible to zoom in, but you can. Certainly, I've done it in terms of my assessment. At year 1, you can see a mass of solar panels. It's these views are looking at the front of the solar panels, so it's like a grey area. I mean, I don't know if any of you have had the chance to pass Dormington at the moment, but you can, at Dormington, at the moment, those panels are quite visible. They are low to the ground. The landscaping has been planted there, but it's nowhere near established. By year 15, that mass of solar panels that is visible, trust me, they are there, that mass will be broken up.
They're not there in that one. You can still see them at year 15, but broken up, and you can see them very visibly there. It's not great on that resolution, but if you look at the LVIA on the accompanying documents, you can see it.
I should have gone to Specsavers, I think. Okay. Are there any other speakers? Councillor Stone.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman. I very much agree with Councillor Andrews that probably these solar panels are in the wrong place. But nevertheless, I think this is a wider debate than just this field. We've been talking about energy security, and I very much agree with all the points that Councillor Harvey made so eloquently a few moments ago about the need to spread renewables, and solar panels is all part of this, even if they are in the wrong place on this occasion. We're talking about national policy, as you've already said, Mr. Chairman. Yes, of course, food supply is important, using our agricultural land, but so are heat and light. And as Councillor Woodall said, we need our independence too, and preserve our independence. When we bear in mind what's happening now in the Middle East, with possible effects on oil supplies, with Ukraine, and the high cost of energy as a result of the war there. As I say, this is a much wider issue than just about this particular field. I'm not keen on the solar panels, but on the other hand, I feel this particular application should be supported. I agree with what Councillor Baker said. I seem to be agreeing with everybody, but apart from possibly those who've got some concerns about this, well, so have I. But nevertheless, on balance, I feel I can support this application for the reasons I've given. And just as a final point, I'm pleased to say we now have solar panels on Brimfield Village Hall. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
You've done your bit. Councillor Hamlin.
Yes, just briefly, as I haven't thrown in my sixpence yet, lots and lots of good points have been made by many of those present. I think, likewise, it's not up to us to like it. The planning balance does seem to me to tip in its favour, and I shall be in support.
Thank you. Councillor Harvey, did you want to come back?
Yes, I was just wondering whether the queries that I raised were going to be able to be answered by officers.
Yes, I believe that if I've made my notes correctly, the one query was in terms of the noise assessment. So the noise assessment hasn't been done. If you read I just checked what I've said, and I've checked what the environmental health officer said. She notes that the noise assessment hasn't been done. She's considered whether it's necessary. She's drawn upon previous experience, and in terms of the site factors, and she's determined that in this case, given the distances to residential properties and the context of the site in terms of intervening vegetation, that one isn't required for this application.
I can't remember now. Was there any other? What?
I was just querying the comments or the concerns that have been raised by Heritage. Whether they've been satisfied or whether they stand.
So the Heritage Officer, I think the Heritage Officer and indeed the applicant's own Heritage Impact Assessment, they both concluded that there was less than substantial harm to the development. So in terms of that less than substantial harm, that directs officers to that there is harm to the setting of the heritage assets, but we have to weigh that up against the public benefits.
Okay, yeah, well, talking of other members highlighting things that they don't like, I really don't like less than substantial harm. It feels to me like you'd actually have to knock a heritage asset down in order to manage to win the argument on that one, but I take the assessment.
I think the house at Stoke Easers Park was burnt down many years ago. Anyway, The original house, I say. Yeah. Yes. Margaret Ants was staying in there when it went on fire. I don't know whether she was responsible or not, but speakers. Then do we have, sorry.
Sorry if I appeared a bit preoccupied while you were discussing. I was just having a discussion with Georgina, and I think just before we go to the vote, I wanted to clarify a point. There is, I think there's an error in terms of the wording at paragraph 6.113 of the report. The second line there refers to the tilted balance. Now, the tilted balance only comes into play where the development plan is silent or out of date. I just wanted to make it very clear that that isn't the case here. The development plan is relevant. The policies that you are considering are up to date. And so it's not a tilted balance. You are being asked to consider tension in the planning balance in terms of concerns about landscape, heritage impacts, and you're being asked to balance those against the public benefits. It's not a tilted balance because the policies are not out of date.
Right. Now, I can't remember who was the proposal by. Well, can I have a proposal, please? Councillor Baker. Approval. As outlined, plus no, in the officer's recommendation. Yeah, is that seconded? Hamlin. Right, we'll now move to any further comments. Sorry. We'll move to any further final comments from the officers. No. Mr. Bank? No. Okay, we'll then move to the local member to finally sum up.
Thank you, Chairman, and thank you to the committee for giving this matter due consideration and for fleshing out all of the issues that I think they've done really comprehensively. You've got 2.4 metre fences, you've got 5.6 metre structures, you've got nearly 30 hectares of solar panels that are 2.9 metres tall. This is environmental blight. Whether you look at it in 5 years, 10 years or 15 years, it's not going to be hidden. It's going to be really harmful. It's imposing industrial structures on our land. There's no benefit whatsoever to the communities who are blighted by it. The idea that sheep will gladly graze, so that'll sort of somehow mitigate the loss of agricultural land, I think is stretching credibility. As Councillor Woodall said, this is a beautiful area, and that's what I'm trying to protect. I make no apology for trying to do so, but I can see how the committee is minded, but I will be explaining to the communities that I represent that I've made their case for them. Thank you.
Thank you. So we now move to the vote. Can I ask the members to, those in favour of the proposition before us?
Okay, so 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11 in favour.
Those against? 1. 2. Abstentions? 1. Okay, then that is carried. Can we have a fairly quick break? I would like to get to the end in the final break, as it were. Before that, 10 minutes break. Okay, we move on now to the land at Clubtail Drive, Homer. Proposed erection of 31 number key worker dwellings, including access to the Clubtail Drive with associated infrastructure and landscaping. Can I now ask the officer, Mr. Lewis, to make the presentation? I knew him from somewhere. Sorry. Oh, could the public speakers please take their seats? I invite Mr. Hubbard and Mr. Mr. Rawlings. I haven't got Mr. Rawlings. Mr. Rawlings, sorry. Take your seats. Thank you. Can I now move to Mr. Lewis, who will
Thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, members. This application relates to a site on the northern edge of Hereford in the area of Homer, just to the west of the A49. The application site is indicated by the red star on the slide above. Next slide, please. Thank you. So the site in question is part of a larger parcel that forms part of the Homer West Urban Extension, which was allocated within the core strategy and originally granted planning permission in 2017. The site as a whole is currently being built out by Blore Homes as a development known as Hereford Point. The aerial image on the slide above shows the location of the current site in relation to the wider urban extension. It's located at the northeastern corner, near to the junction between the site Spine Road and the A49 Trunk Road. The land between the site and the A49 benefits from planning permission for the provision of a park and choose facility. Next slide, please. This slide shows some images of the site and the surrounding area. Working from the top left clockwise, we can see the view of the site from the junction of Hedgerow Way and the A49. We can then see the view across the site to the west, looking towards the rear of the neighbouring properties on Clubtail Drive and Darters Lane. Bottom left, we have a view from the site looking west towards the hard-standing area that's been approved as a park and choose site, which members would have seen on site yesterday as well. And finally, the site access, which is to be existing and to be taken from Clubtail Drive. Next slide, please. So the current application is made in full and seeks planning permission for the erection of 31 C3 residential dwellings. The scheme is being promoted as comprising a 100% affordable housing scheme on the basis that it fulfills the requirements of a build-to-rent scheme and would be for the exclusive use of military personnel considered essential local workers based in Herefordshire. The mix of dwellings comprises 12 one-bed apartments and 19 two-bed maisonettes. On the screen above you have the site plans and the units proposed. The scheme makes use of the existing access from Clubtail Drive, which divides the site into two parcels. As can be seen from the plans and the corresponding blue dots, the majority of the units are two-storey variations of a Satterfield house type, with all units on the southern parcel being in this format. There are 2 units on the northern parcel as well, but this also supports 2 three-storey apartment buildings at the northeastern corner of the site. The principal elevations of those buildings are all shown on the slides. Access to each parcel is taken off the central access road, with parking then provided in a central courtyard style. With regards to the appraisal, the development plan is a core strategy and the Homer and Shellick NDP. Members will be aware, however, that the Council is currently unable to demonstrate a 5-year supply of housing land, meaning the relevant policies of the development plan are out of date and the tilted balance is engaged. This means that planning permission should be granted unless the MPPS specifically directs that permission should be refused, or the adverse impacts of doing so would significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. With regards to the principal development, it's been mentioned already that the site forms part of the Homer West Urban Extension, as was identified in the core strategy, and it is also within the settlement boundary as defined by the Homer and Shellick NDP. The principal development is hence supported here by the development plan. However, in order to be permitted, the specific details of the scheme need to be assessed for wider compliance with the policies within that plan. Next slide, please. To consider some of the key issues, the site has a relationship, as mentioned, with the adjacent Park and Choose site, which is currently laid hard standing but not yet delivered. Provision of this facility was a policy requirement of the Homer West allocation, and a reserve matters approval for the scheme was granted by the Council in 2021. The slide above shows the approved layout for the Park and Choose on the right-hand side, and the current application site is to the left and denoted by the dashed red line. For the avoidance of doubt, these are separate land parcels and the current proposal does not encroach onto the approved layout for the Park and Choose scheme, although it did fall within the red line for that approved development. However, It is acknowledged that there is an annotation on the approved plans for the Park and Choose that suggested that the current proposal site may be reserved for future expansion, and this was a point that we discussed on site yesterday. The annotation, however, does not reflect any formal controls, and the land is not safeguarded by any planning conditions, legal agreements or policies. The 100 space facility was approved by the Council in 2021 as being adequate to meet the projected demand at the time, meaning that the residual area of land is now considered white land with no formal restrictions upon it. This means that alternative uses can be legitimately considered, provided that it would not compromise the function of the Park and Choose, which officers consider this scheme does not. Next slide, please. With regards to housing need, this scheme proposes that all units would be occupied by military personnel based in the local area. The MPPF encourages the planning system to facilitate housing to meet the needs of different groups, which includes the provision of affordable housing for essential local workers, which includes military personnel. The scheme here comprises 31 dwellings, which will be delivered by the applicant as a 100% affordable build-to-rent scheme in partnership with the Defence Infrastructure Organisation, or the DIO. The military has a well-established presence in Herefordshire, and it's clear that there is a particular demand for new accommodation for single service personnel in particular, which this scheme would help provide for, whilst also freeing up private rental accommodation in the city that's currently used for those purposes. A Section 106 agreement has been drafted and is attached as Appendix 1 to the officer report, which the key terms of which are on the slide now. Importantly, it secures that the properties will be used for military use in perpetuity, ensures that affordability criteria are met, and it ties the delivery of the development to a completion of a binding contract between the applicant and the DIO. Subject to these measures being secured, the proposal is considered to align with the principles of the MPPF and local plan policies H1 and H3, meeting a local need for specialist accommodation, whilst also aligning with the Council's commitments under the Armed Forces Covenant. This is a benefit to which officers consider to weigh strongly in favour of the scheme. Next slide, please. With regards to local character and design, the development plan broadly requires the delivery of high-quality, well-integrated schemes that reflect local character and the landscape. The slide above shows a site plan and some of the visualisations supplied in support of the application. As mentioned, the site forms part of the Homer West Urban Extension and the parcel land sits comfortably within that context. The proposed layout responds to earlier patterns of development, and although the scheme's density is quantitatively higher than earlier phases, this reflects its apartment-led format. The physical built form is broadly commensurate with surrounding patterns. With regards to design, the scheme predominantly comprises two-storey Satterfield house types, which ensures coherence with earlier phases by being of a similar design, scale, form and material palette. To the northeast corner of the site, two three-storey apartment buildings are proposed, which will be finished in stone, and officers are mindful that some representations have raised concerns regarding the scale of these buildings. However, they are considered to be appropriate when experienced in the wider context of the urban extension, and the approach has been informed by policy HS4 of the NDP, which direct that development on Homer may be up to 3 storeys, and particularly should seek to provide landmark buildings on key positions and corners. The scheme is considered to be a reflection of this principle and is not regarded as leading to any harm to local character. A scheme of landscaping has also been put forward, which includes planting of trees, hedgerows and shrubs within the site, which will help to support biodiversity and soften visual impact. Implementation of this and the long-term management will be secured by condition. Next slide, please. With regard to amenity, the MPPF and local policies require that new development protects residential amenity and addresses potential noise impacts. In this sense, it's acknowledged that some concerns have been raised in local representations in terms of the compatibility of the accommodation with surrounding land uses and the potential for harm through means of overshadowing and overlooking. In the first instance, the proposal is for residential use, albeit to be occupied by military personnel, and hence is inherently compatible with neighbouring housing, which is obviously also residential. Attention has been paid to the positioning of fenestration in order to avoid the potential for overlooking. The design of the scheme has paid due regard to the relationship with neighbouring houses, ensuring that commensurate 2-storey units are positioned next to existing dwellings, whilst maintaining good levels of separations between plots to avoid overbearing. This is particularly the case in the southwest corner of the site, where a greater separation is proposed to account for differences in ground levels. The cross-sectional plan on the slide above shows the separation and differences in levels between plots, which is similar to arrangements that can be seen throughout the Hereford Point site. With regard to the future amenity of future occupants, there is some potential for impact upon occupants of plots facing the A49 as a result of traffic noise. This has been assessed and it's considered that the impact can be managed to acceptable levels with mitigation, subject to the imposition of conditions. There's no objection from environmental health in terms of living standards, and hence no policy conflict here. Next slide, please. Access to the site is via Clubtail Drive and Hedgerow Way, which is the main spine road through the site linking to the A49 and the Roman Road. The arrangement will also support the Park and Choose site in time and is considered suitable to support the uplift in traffic associated with the scheme. There are no objections from Local Highways Authority or National Highways, subject to the imposition of conditions. Parking provision is also provided at a rate of 1 space per bedroom, which accords with the specific standards sought by Policy HS4 of the NDP. With regards to sustainable transport modes, the scheme would link into the pedestrian and cycle infrastructure that serves the wider Hereford Point development, which then connects onwards to the network of Hereford. To briefly summarise other material matters, the site is not identified as being at risk of flooding, and a suitable scheme of foul and surface water drainage has been provided with no objections from Welsh Water or the Council's drainage engineers. On ecology, the site is not considered to hold any particular value at present, and habitat enhancement can be secured by condition. The development is one that's subject to the mandatory 10% biodiversity net gain, and delivery of this will be secured through statutory condition. The scheme's also been subject to a positive assessment under the Habitats regulations, and Natural England have confirmed they have no objection. And finally, in the context the scheme comprises 100% affordable housing, the Council's SBD directs that financial contributions towards community infrastructure are not to be sought here, which has been confirmed by the Council's Planning Obligations Manager. Next slide, please. So to apply the final balance, as mentioned, we are considering this in the context of the tilted balance. There are no protected assets that are identified as being affected here, so it is the tilted balance at a paragraph 11d(ii), meaning permission should be granted unless harm significantly demonstrably outweighs the benefits. Locationally, the site's part of a parcel of land that's already been allocated for an urban extension and within a settlement boundary. The principle of development is hence supported, and the delivery of housing in a sustainable location is a benefit in favour of the scheme, particularly at a time when the council has a housing land supply shortfall. Further to this, the housing will be delivered in a format that constitutes 100% affordable housing, and this will help to meet the needs of essential local workers in terms of locally based military personnel. This delivers a number of benefits which weigh in favour of the scheme and contributes towards the social and economic objectives of sustainable development. No objections have been received from any technical consultee, and no significant harm has been identified across other key planning matters which, either alone or in combination, are considered to significantly and demonstrably outweigh the benefits. The scheme, therefore, is regarded as benefiting from the positive presumption and recommended for approval accordingly, subject to the completion of the 106 Appendix 1 and the imposition of the conditions set out at the end of the officer report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Lewis. And now we'll move on to invite Mr. Rawlings on behalf of Mr. Hubbard, a local resident, to speak in objection to the application.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. There are 5 primary grounds for objections collated from the residents. First is overdevelopment. Element 2 of Policy HD4 for the Holmwood West expansion allows for 500 new homes at a density of up to 35 dwellings per hectare. The proposed scheme would be 60.7 dwellings per hectare, with practically no garden space for well-being, which is also inconsistent with the current 22 dwellings per hectare elsewhere on development. The further 31 dwellings, together with the already approved houses, takes this to 20% above that 500 home plan. Second, traffic and noise issues. This application effectively fixes the entrance exit to the 100 park and choose spaces and the 31 dwellings via the Clubtail Drive. Those on the Adeline and Albany side of the development would have traffic moving round 4 sides of them, unnecessarily increasing noise and pollution levels, affecting the air quality under the Environmental Policy SS6 Element 5, and have an adverse impact arising from noise or air quality under the Sustainable Design Policy Element 4. Residents are also concerned that junctions on Clubtail Drive are not wide enough for the additional traffic, which would be more than the 11 a.m., 9 p.m. peak movements because of the movement in and out of the 100 park and choose spaces. With pedestrians and cyclists also using these pinch point junctions to connect with safe and sustainable travel options, there will be greater risk of accidents occurring. The Highway Policy MT1 Element 4 refers to the provision of safe entrance and exit provision for all modes of transport. Furthermore, the noise baseline was measured during a half term and did not include the Friday afternoon extended rush hour, which is well known in that area. Placing the entrance exit to the park and choose on Hedgerow Way near the A49 would minimise the noise and be safer. This application diminishes the implementation of policy MT1 Element 2 to promote highway safety and promote active travel. The 350 park and choose spaces approved under the Master Planning Application 15478 has been cut to 100, which is unlikely to deliver congestion relief because of that size buses will not service it, so everyone carries driving into the city centre. Third point, overlooking. There is an approximate 2 metre drop in height diagonally from the rear of the Satterfield dwellings 3, 4 and 5 and 6 to the ground level of Clubtail Drive, Darters Lane. This is a diagonal slope.
I'm afraid I'm going to have to ask you to stop. You've passed the 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you. Now I move on to Mr. Rawlings to speak on behalf of the applicant. You have 3 minutes. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon. Firstly, this is an excellent, comprehensive and well-balanced report. So you'll be relieved, hopefully, to hear. I'm not going to try and repeat all the contents, but I just want to focus on the rationale which underpins this proposal before you, because it's actually quite straightforward. The military has a long-established and proud relationship with Hereford. I don't need to tell you that, but it will endure for the foreseeable future. Not only are they essential key workers, they are part of the local community. But such are the current accommodation constraints facing the military that, at present, many of their personnel are accommodated throughout the central area of Hereford in a large number of rental properties, mostly flats. If there were the opportunity to relocate a significant number of these personnel into new purpose-built accommodation at Homer, not only would this support the military, being well placed for their housing needs, it would also release a key element of city centre accommodation back to the market, thereby securing its much-needed availability for the wider community and helping to address the acute shortage of private rented stock in the city. So it follows that the application before you is for 31 key worker dwellings in a mix of 1-bed and 2-bed units, which can accommodate 50 individual military personnel. The application has been prepared and submitted by Bloor Homes, but it is expressly for the Defence Infrastructure Organisation to meet their specific accommodation needs. And for the avoidance of any doubt, should the application be approved, Bloor will deliver the development, but all the units will be sold to the military and will be managed by the DIO. Notably, and as set out in your officer's report, and as you've just heard your case officer say, the Section 106 agreement will have a legal restriction upon the development which will provide for all of the units to be delivered as affordable private rented accommodation with occupation restricted to military personnel in perpetuity. You will also note that Bloor will enter into a binding contract with the DIO to transfer the units to the DIO before any development commences. As I trust you will have seen from your site visit, the scale of the units proposed reflects the character of the surrounding Homer development. Most of the proposed dwellings will be 2 stories in height, with 2 carefully sited and orientated apartment buildings being 3 stories. This is in keeping. Homer West contains a mix of 1, 2 and 2.5 story dwellings with a 3-story specialist housing development at the southern gateway to the site off Roman Road. Further, there are no outstanding technical tests during the course of determination of this application. Finally, we have listened to and liaised closely with your officers on the proposal before you this afternoon, in particular on the Section 106 agreement, to ensure the development fulfills the definition of affordable housing, being wholly affordable rented accommodation for the sole use of the military personnel in perpetuity. And as the trustee imagery in your report conveys, Bloor will deliver a high-quality development to accommodate these key workers.
I have to stop you now. Thank you.
Thank you.
Past those 3 minutes. Thank you.
That's okay, Dan.
Right, if you could kindly take your seats back in the public gallery. Right, thank you. Now, Councillor Cornthwaite is the local ward member for this item. He speaks and then has the right to speak at the end of the debate. He does not have a vote. He has a 10-minute time limit. Cornthwaite.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to open with a short verse of scripture from Proverbs 31, 8-9. Speak up for those who cannot speak for themselves, for the rights of all who are destitute. Speak up and judge fairly. Defend the rights of the poor and needy. I would not suggest the people I'm representing here today are destitute, poor or needy, but they do need their concerns regarding this proposal to be heard. I'm here this morning in my capacity as the Home Ward Councillor to resolutely object to the plans for this proposed development. I want to say that I'm grateful that so many of you who are considering this application took time out yesterday morning to attend the site and hopefully see firsthand the reason why over 28 local residents have taken the time to register their objections and make their genuine feelings known. I've spoken face to face with many of these residents, and on this development, I'm completely reassured that this is not a case of NIMBYism, not in my backyard. It is with regret that the Parish Council Chairman, Mr John Phipps, is away on holiday this week because I know he's 100% supportive of the residents' views. I am, however, also a member of Homer and Shelwick Parish Council and can reiterate the concerns that we as a council raised when this application was put before us earlier this year. I know these are all listed on the council website, but for ease of remembrance they are: number 1, application contravenes Homer and Shelwick's NDP. That's probably the third time I've heard an NDP being thrown out today or being referenced to where it's being ignored. Policy HS4. There are 42 parking spaces provided for the 50 bedrooms, therefore a shortfall of 8 spaces. Design, application fails due to privacy, outlook, sunlight and daylight to the existing residents. 2. The proposed site is approximately 1.5 metres higher than the adjacent 2-storey private houses and therefore will lead to an overbearing effect due to the proposal's 3-storey form, leading to overshadowing. The 2 3-storey blocks of flats, when approaching from the A49, will create an over-dominating presence when entering the point development. 3. This was not an original allocated area for development, and there has been no proposed drainage strategy. The visualisations forming part of the application in View 3 does not show the true reality of the adjacent properties in height, nor solar panels to the south-facing roofs, therefore non-compliance with net zero. Between 20 and 30 local residents made the effort to attend that parish council meeting, making it the best attended parish council meeting that I've attended, and I'm pleased to report that the chairman on that occasion extended public time to include all those who'd made the effort to be there. I want to make 2 points. I know what Mr Hubbard was going to go on to say. Overlooking, there is an approximate 2-metre drop in height diagonally from the rear of the Satterfield dwellings, that's 3 and 4 and 5 and 6, to the ground level of Clubtail Drive and Darters Lane. With this height difference, most of that rear elevation of the Satterfield properties would be above the existing fence line, creating a loss of sunlight in the morning. Those Satterfield properties, being directly opposite, would also have an unobstructed view into the Clubtail properties. The taller 3-storey Albany, marked 13 to 18, is on ground that is 2 metres higher than the lower Satterfield, so would also overlook. He wanted to mention flooding. Policy SD3 element 5 refers to a development not increasing runoff. Runoff water caused flooding to at least 1 garden in Clubtail Drive. Well, I know it was, we now know it was 2. because it's numbers 9 and numbers 11, in autumn of 2022. A wide ditch was created belatedly, filling a planning condition. The drainage strategy and drawings calculate the capacity of the drainage provision, but it is not clear the points at which runoff water is channeled into this system. If it gets beyond the frontages of the Satterfield properties 1 to 6, or if the hard surface of the Park and Choose drainage system is overwhelmed and creates runoff, either which would cause flooding to some properties in Clubdale Drive or Darters Lane. 5. This is a point, again, from Mr. Hubbard. Not in keeping with development, the Albany and Adeline are large, continuous facade 3-storey dwellings compared to the mix of detached and semi-detached 2 and 2.5-storey houses across the Bloor Homes development, and so are not in keeping. Yesterday, after the site meeting, I took further time out to look at the proposed entry to the site off Clubdale Drive. Currently, Clubdale Drive is a quiet residential street, as was promised and shown to residents when they bought their properties. At that time, this piece of land was being allocated as 350-car park and choose facility with both leisure and a good number of allotments to enhance the area in which the development sits. To accommodate this application, that has been reduced to a 100-car facility with little promise that one of that size will attract a bus to call there. A suitable leisure area is not included, and the number of allotments has also been vastly reduced. Currently, 2 houses, number 7 and number 9 Clubdale Drive, sit either side of that proposed entry to the site. Having talked to both residents, it seems that neither has realised that the whole of the traffic to and from that site will drive by their front doors, and no consideration has been given to the impact that this will have on either of them. Although what Bloor Homes have said rather than put in a document cannot be proved, many would endorse the comments made by Mark Hookins in this week's Hereford Times that this site was earmarked for a future park and allotments project. This was also the comment of Kevin Jobson in his letter of objection. In the objections raised by Jeremy Milne, he's able to cite things that happened while he was a councillor, albeit not for Homer, where plans were made regarding this site in 2016 when it was called Homer West Development Site. This is where we find one of the earliest references to the 350 vehicle park and ride plus allotments. This requirement, it seems, was acknowledged by Design and Access Statement referencing the Local Plan Core Strategy 2011-31, which, under Policy HD4, states that the new area, Homer West, will be required to encourage sustainable modes of travel and discourage car use. The scheme will be reliant on walking and cycling routes and bus priority to access the city and existing community facilities. Mr. Milne adds in his objection that this policy was not followed then and that this proposal threatens to fail this policy even more seriously. I have to say that on this occasion, I believe that Mr. Milne has made comments that have been researched and documented, and I fully endorse the points he has made. I have a major concern myself with regard to the purpose of this development that may well not directly fall under planning umbrella, and that is security. In my initial thinking, I actually thought this development would enhance the security of the estate, as I, in another life, used to be responsible for keeping an eye on properties being used for this purpose. Research has shown, however, this is no longer the case in Hereford. So here we are, being asked to give permission for the building of dwellings on a private housing estate to what, in effect, could become one of the top terrorist targets in our city. To sum up, however, I want to say that both I and many of the local residents are fully supportive of the members of the armed forces and their support staff that live in and around our city. I was one of them for a long time, and I'm grateful that it is they that brought me to Hereford. I will take great joy and count it a privilege to work with planners on a development they propose in the future, one that is and that would have not such a negative impact on what effectively would become their own neighbourhood.
Thank you. And now we invite debate. Any speakers? Councillor Simmons.
Thank you, Chair. And again, thank you to the case officer for the report and for taking us to site the other day. Also to the comments from both the speakers and the ward member. I share many of the concerns of the ward member, particularly with regard to security and safety of our military personnel, given the location of that, the location of all military personnel in one very confined building and space, with a park and choose facility next to it, with no sort of intervisibility from and safety and security sort of overwatch from anybody else nearby. Obviously, the Defence Infrastructure Organisation has considered that and has not made any representation, so I cannot comment further. What I am concerned about is how this impacts any future deliverability and viability of the park and choose service. Looking at the original outline permission P150478 back from 2017, it envisaged a much larger 350 site with a sort of drive-in, drive-out bay for the bus. I can't see in the planning application subsequently where that drive-in, drive-out element was removed and the access was put through Clubtail Drive. I'm assuming that exists, but we haven't. I can't see it in the schedule in the officer's report which one specifies that. So could he just clarify that at some point? What we're being asked to do with the sort of way this site is set out, and can I just say I do support the principle of freeing up 1 and 2 bedroom apartments in town with new development, perhaps a bit closer to camp and to areas where personnel may be working. I feel that the way this has been shoehorned onto that particular site is a concern because we're not able to deliver real landscape enhancement buffer between the rural to the north and east and the urban. And what we're now effectively looking to, be asked to approve is a large sort of concrete area with drives and parking area with then built roofs obviously around there. You're going to get a real heat island effect with climate change combined with a large tarmacked area to the east, with very little in terms of landscape infrastructure or buffering as raised by the landscape officer, I think. Particularly the eastern boundary of the site where you have got houses, the steps coming straight, or the doorways or openings coming straight out onto rear of parked cars. We're being asked to deliver the trees in the visualisations within the park and choose facility and not within any of the site boundary of this application. So, this particular site on its own, this application on its own, doesn't, and I feel, comply with policies LD 1 in terms of landscape and townscape and ensuring we've got that green infrastructure. I'd like to hear what anybody else has to say about this, though. Thank you.
Councillor Baker.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'd like to congratulate Councillor Cornthwaite on his very impassioned speech. I think it's your first go, isn't it, right? Well done. And I certainly support what you're saying. And I got quite excited when I first read this. It said key workers, and I thought, oh, gosh, nurses, policemen, firemen, etc., hospital workers, and all sorts of things. But no, it's an army camp. There's nothing wrong with that. I did my time back in the day, but didn't have posh places like this to live in as a single man, but there we are. But the development itself is certainly an overdevelopment. I mean, there's too many properties on one plot, and it's overbearing. If you're coming in, heading south down the A49, you're going to see these great big apartments looming over you. And this business of park and choose, I don't know quite what choice you'll have.
Michael.
I think it'd be park and walk, I would have thought, but you won't be able to walk down the A49 either. So it'd be park and walk down through the housing estate. I can't see many people wanting to do that, unless you've got a very small fold-up bike you can put in the back of your car. Our big problem is, as members of the planning committee within this council, this is an MOD site, and it's an MOD development, for want of a better word. Okay, it's a private developer, but it's supervised by the MOD, which means that if we refused it, we wouldn't win an appeal. The government will make sure that the inspectorate keep it approved, being realistic. But anyway, I don't like the site, but I've got no option other than to approve it.
Can I just say the use of the word key worker? I personally think that there's no more key worker than, especially in today's climate, than a member of the military. Anyway, that's another matter, unrelated to the planning application. Councillor Harvey, I believe, was it?
Thank you, Chair. And having spent my working career in defence research, I'm hugely supportive of the military and always have been. However, for me, this site is the choice of, I suppose, for want of a better term, kettling this housing for military on an intensively developed site is an odd choice. I can absolutely understand why the military want to sprinkle the location of their personnel throughout the city for all sorts of reasons, not least of which is their own safety and security. And an intensive development like this just doesn't seem to make sense. And I think Councillor Cornthwaite's made a number of compelling points in that regard. I would far more reasonably have expected some sort of a partnership with a social housing provider, so that this sort of accommodation could have been pepper potted through that housing provider's stock on a bigger development footprint. But that's not what we're looking at here. I am also concerned that the vision for a 350 car park and ride facility at this location is being lost entirely. As we heard, over 600 houses have now been built out as part of this huge development at Homer. And Bloor have not yet delivered on the required sustainable travel mitigation for this enormous site. And let's remember, members, that this was a strategic housing site that was part of our local plan. It was conceived to include this large park and ride. And yes, the residents of this site would have been able to walk from their homes to benefit from accessing buses to get themselves into and out of the city. But as importantly, this was a really important northern drop-off and pick-up point for the whole city and for people travelling into it from the north. And that vision has been eroded. And if this development comes forward using part of the footprint that was originally conceived for that park and ride, not park and choose, park and ride, and the requirement was that there was a bus service that was funded and paid for as part of the overall concept, that will be lost to the city forever. So, for those reasons alone, I am really concerned about this as a development. But when you add to it that the original conception was that the access for that large park and ride was going to be off the main spur road and not through an offshoot and the existing housing development, I think it just compounds my concern that people who've bought houses, assuming that they were living on a side road, are now going to have a major sort of thoroughfare through to both what remains of the proposed parking area for travel into the city and to this intensive development. I also, looking at the development, yes, there's 3-storey apartments that are being proposed there, which will be out of context with respect to the housing around it that we saw on the site visit yesterday. But also, I think what I'm not seeing in the layout of the insides of those apartments is any lifts. It's all stairs up to the 3 levels, and certainly my experience in Ledbury, where there are 3-storey flats for families, for people with disability, and I'm sure there are disabled members of our services who continue to work and give good service. That is something I'm not seeing in the way this development is coming forward, and I yield at this point.
Okay, Councillor Simmons.
Sorry, I would just like to apologise to the case officer because I have found the planning application that consented the different access.
I was just going to come on that point. Just to clarify on the Park and Choose site and its history, because it obviously has been quite a central theme of comments from various members. So just to run through the sort of history of it from conception in the local plan. So HD4 was the allocation policy for Homer West. It refers to a park and choose site, so it's not specifically to be a park and ride. It's park and choose is the wording that uses. That policy isn't prescriptive in terms of a quantum of spaces that it's expected to accommodate. So when the application came in for the outline application for the whole urban extension, there was a plan there which identified this location as broadly for the park and choose. You are correct, it did say indicative 350 spaces. However, at that stage it was a master plan and it wasn't secured at that stage. And as time moves on, as often the case with a large site like this, things change within the site. So the reserve matters applications have then come forward on the site in various phases. There's a specific application in 2021, which was for the park and choose site specifically. So that's referenced in section 3.1 of the officer report. And the plan that we had on the slide earlier, which is the 100 space facility, I don't know if it's possible to get that back up, was the scheme that the council approved at that time. I can't speak for the specifics of what happened there because I wasn't involved. But if there were concerns that the access to the site, then let's say that in terms of the plan, it approved 100 spaces, it approved access off Clubtail Drive. Those are key points now which we aren't to revisit here today. If those were a concern, they should have been raised then, and it would certainly be able to rise to reconsider those things now. In terms of the expansion site, it is correct there is an annotation on the plan which would suggest that it is reserved for future expansion. However, that isn't reflected in any condition on the consent. It isn't reflected in any legal agreement or indeed in any policy. So, in officers' view, to resist development on this site because it would in some way compromise the park and choose wouldn't be appropriate. As long as it preserves the park and choose site in terms of function, i.e. not impinging on safe access or the ability to link into the wider networks, then officers would take the view that there's no policy conflict to prevent alternative uses.
Thank you for that. Appreciate that clarification. And yes, it was in your report. And yes, I hadn't looked at that other previous application until just seen that now. It's still my point still stands though with this visualizations that we've been provided for this site and this application is relying on delivery of trees within that other application, the park and choose, on that eastern boundary of the site. So I just would like to make sure that's clear and stated. Thanks.
Any other speakers? Councillor Andrews.
Thank you. I think it has already been mentioned I think at least by Councillor Cornswaite, these 2 blocks of flats, as you come in on the A49, what are you going to see? A piece of tarmac and 2 rather uninspiring, I'm saying, very, very conventional, perhaps is a better way of putting it, politer way of putting it anyway. 2 blocks of flats. Not exactly a welcoming sight, really. I mean, this enormous development off Roman Road that seemed to have no facilities for the residents anyway. And really, I can't see there's any facilities for the military personnel who are going to supposedly live there, or are they all supposed to be out on manoeuvres at all times? Really, I really think this needs to be totally rethought.
Right. Any other speakers? Sorry.
I'm concerned by the fact that so many of the objections come from residents who've been so badly misled by Bloor about what the purpose of that land was, and whether kind of approving this development jeopardises their opportunity to actually fulfil their promises to the residents.
Yeah, unfortunately, we don't know. I mean, it's circumstantial what the promises were, other than if there's any legal documentation of what those promises were. And sadly, they don't have any relevance on this application. I think that'll be the case, wouldn't it? Yeah, that's the situation. I don't worry, I've been down this road. Anyway. Right. Any other speakers? There are none. We have no proposal before us. Can I have someone to propose something, please?
Can I recommend we defer this application? I know we don't like doing deferrals, but I do think that it should be clear to the developer and to the Defence Infrastructure Organisation that we voice some significant concerns that we would like to see revised. I mean, what is the case officer's view on that?
It's within the gift of the committee to defer if they feel there's a planning reason for doing so. So I think if that was the way you wanted to go with it, I think it's appropriate to do so. We would just need a clear direction in terms of what the purpose of that deferment is and what the instructions are to officers in terms of securing amendments that would overcome the concerns you've raised today.
Okay, from my perspective, the one that I've been raising is in relation to LD1, and that there is not sufficient within the scope of this on the northern and eastern boundary, ironically named Hedgerow Way, but particularly the eastern boundary. Take out the visualisations they've prepared. There is nothing that softens that boundary or takes into account climate change and the need to, have green infrastructure there to support that. So I think it's majority LD1, and perhaps to LD2, because there were originally hedgerows and etc. along this area that have been taken away, and I don't think that what's there proposed supports that. And LD3 green infrastructure to try and improve that on that link. Thank you.
Yes, I just wanted to clarify really. So LD2 and LD3 more relevant to, so we're talking about landscaping, enhanced landscaping. Reference to LD1, I infer that was more to do with scale in terms of built form. So I'd also suggest SD1 is a reason there as well, but we can certainly look at those. Yeah.
Councillor Andrews?
I think also we should look at the proposal that all traffic, even for the park and shoes, when it eventually comes into fruition, has to go through Clubtail Drive, which is at the moment a quiet residential road.
Was the inference there that to look for an alternative arrangement to the park and choose?
Trying to look for an alternative entrance to park and to this development, so that eventually when park and choose comes in, if it ever does, and I have to say park and choose or park and ride are a revenue cost, not a revenue earner, that why should all the traffic have to come in and out through what is now designed as a quiet residential road?
So the park and choose facility, as Councillor Simmons mentioned, that has been approved, so we wouldn't be able to revisit that. In terms of this specific development, obviously is also utilising the same arrangement or proposing to. The local highways authority has no objections to that in terms of capacity. So in terms of grounds for revisiting it, I'm slightly hesitant there. But if we are looking at a wider sort of change to the site on some of the points that Councillor Simmons has looked at, then we raised in terms of scale, then we could explore if it's a possibility there. But I would caveat that I don't think there is particularly strong grounds to insist on an alternative.
Councillor Baker and then Councillor Hamblin.
I think if we're going to look at a deferral, then possibly we could look at the overdevelopment of the site with regard to the number of dwellings per hectare, and possibly overlooking of the existing houses because of the differences in elevations there, and maybe loss of light to some of those existing houses that Frank was talking about. It's a matter of degree, really, but I think we need to use every bit of ammunition in our book if we're going to make use of a deferral.
Yes, I just want one clarification. It was suggested that the development is overdevelopment, but it was 35, I think, was in the planning permission. But that was for the whole of the site, was it?
HD4, the allocation policy for Home West, has a target of 35 per hectare, I believe. This is admittedly a lot higher than that, but the quantitative way of looking at it is perhaps not that helpful in this context because the format of the accommodation is apartments and maisonettes, so inherently you are going to have more of those on a hectare because it's a more efficient use of the land. In terms of the built form, as you mentioned in the appraisal, and footprints of building, it is broadly similar with the same separation distances as the rest of the urban extension.
Yeah. So I mean, the density of the whole of the development would be under 35, would it? No, I mean, not this development, the whole of the development.
I don't have the figure for what has been built to hand, I'm afraid, but that 35 is the target.
Yeah. Right. Councillor Hamblin.
Thank you, Chair. My comments apply not only to this development, but also to the Park and Choose, I think they're calling it. On behalf of people who want to arrive at or leave the site on a bike or on foot, they seem to have been completely overlooked. The only way in and out is through Clubtail Drive. Can it not be made more some sort of at the south end, some way of joining the road systems, or not ideal, but through onto the pavement on the side of the A49? There seems to be nothing.
Yeah, I think that's the difficulty. I don't think the original proposal thought it through properly, but that's another issue. But I don't think that's relevant to our planning application. Sorry, yes, Ms. Jones.
Yeah, along Clubtail Drive there's a 3-metre shared footway cycleway, and there's also links down into the cul-de-sac to the south, as well as it linking up with other cycleways which take you to the south of the whole development down towards the Roman Road, and also onto the lay-by the church onto the A49. So there is a comprehensive cycle strategy throughout the site.
Doesn't look like you can get through to me, looking at the Google map.
There are some points of it, Councillor, which haven't quite yet been delivered yet. There is, you're correct, there's no link down the side of the A49, which I think is what you were sort of getting at initially. There is a link on if you have a copy of the presentation layout plan, there's a link to the south next to the allotments, which goes on to, I think it's Darters Lane, I think that next cul-de-sac is, which then goes on down towards Homer House Farm and onto the wider network that serves the site there.
Right. Yeah. Yeah. Can I? Yeah. As I said, we've got a proposal, but no secondary yet. But I assume there will be a secondary for the deferral. But we need solid grounds for that. That will. landscaping grounds, but
I'm on the landscaping grounds. I don't have an issue with the scale of density given that it's apartments. And I disagree with the loss of light. I don't think there's a loss of light. Appreciate that. Whether people feel that that is strong enough, people are that bothered about the landscaping grounds, that's my personal, and that's what I'd recommend. But
could we not deal with landscaping? We could deal with on condition, couldn't we? Rather than deferring the whole thing. The other way to get things changed would be to refuse it and then let the developers put in a new application that meets some of the concerns we've had already.
my sense was that refusing it gives no opportunity for that. That's then out of our hands. So I was trying to find a way to see if we could, and that could just be ignored. If you feel that this isn't actually achievable on those grounds, then I will remove my suggestion.
Is it defensible? Is it achievable through conditions? Shall we put it that way?
We can, of course, condition landscaping, and as we know, we often do. I think the concern that I'm reading between the lines of Councillor Simmons is that there actually isn't a great deal of space on the eastern side of the boundary with the between the built form of the two apartment buildings and the Park and Chew site to deliver anything meaningful. And I sense that what you're sort of getting at is you would be looking for changes to site layout because it needs to create that space to deliver that. Is that fair? Yeah.
That's exactly it.
Mr. Banks.
So sorry, it's Mr. Withers, but it's been a long day. So I just wanted to be clear that it's a landscaping issue and not in combination with the scale and the height, because obviously there's been discussion about the 3-storey scale of this. So I just think I want to be clear. I've understood what Councillor Simmons has said to be creating more space to put in more structural landscaping on that boundary, and if that is the committee's view, then that's clear. But I've picked up other discussion points through the debate that I want to ensure that Adam, when he picks up the phone, knows the terms of the committee's concerns.
Yes. Are we content to continue with this as those the only grounds for deferral?
I would say.
I've got to ask the proposal first. But
It ought to be deferred to be sorted out.
So are we saying that we need to look at layout to enable the landscape?
Well, I think we do need to be realistic that there have been some discussions about the scale of those buildings. For example, by Councillor Cornthwaite in relation to some of the existing dwellings on Clubtail Drive. If you say you have no concerns about their scale, but you want more space for landscaping, and you move them back, inevitably that has knock-on effects because they are then closer to neighbouring dwellings, and it might necessitate looking at scale. So
it's not just layout rather than the
well,
the
it may.
height
I mean,
or
this is the sort of problem. Is not the problem, but you can't really change. It's quite a one-dimensional thing to look at, and it will have. It could have implications in other areas. To move those buildings back to create that space, maybe that you create an arrangement actually that they're that much further back in the site and closer to neighbours that you no longer support the scale as a hypothetical scenario. So, yeah, I appreciate it's a difficult one because it depends how. What we're looking at.
I will remove.
I think if, for example, if there was
I will
to look at
remove my recommendation for deferral. If someone else wants to make it a basis on scale, I will then add in elements with regard to landscape to that recommendation. Otherwise, I don't see any other way than to approve it.
Councillor Andrews.
Thank you. I think there was also excuse me, I think there was also some unhappiness, and certainly from Councillor Cornthwaite, over the 3-storey blocks of flats, their position and their size.
I think Mr. Lewis actually covered that point, that he thought it was not defensible, bearing in mind that the nature of those flats. But anyway, that's Mr. Lewis.
One way to approach it in sort of the context of Councillor Simmons' motion would be to perhaps say it is a landscape-led reason for deferral, but caveating that resolution that it also needs to be subject to any scale design changes that are considered to be necessary by officers as a consequence.
Bingo.
Where are we now?
Okay, I reinstate the deferral option. Hopefully that will be seconded based on exactly what Adam has said with regard to landscape-led, but that has implications for site layout.
Yeah.
Right.
And I would second that.
That's Councillor. Can I apologise to Mr. I was going to call him Councillor Withers, of calling him Mr. Banks. It's been a long morning, and I'm a bit dehydrated. But anyway, I'll just call him Simon anyway.
No. I think the flexibility that revised motion gives us is clear, and the agent is in the room and has heard the nature of the concerns, and those I hope will enable us to have an educated conversation and to bring it back to you in a form that you can support.
More educated than we've managed so far.
I can't imagine how you've been educated this morning. But anyway, that's another matter. Right. Can I now? Are there any further comments from officers?
I think we've covered everything.
Yes, we had a seconder, didn't we? Yes, yeah, that's right, Councillor Thomas. Yes, that's right. Can I now go to the local member to finally sum up? Close the debate.
Okay, I just want a couple of points. It was on the picture when Adam showed us the sites. That access, I will hope that if it went to deferral, you would look at that access point again. That is a real area of concern. And at the moment, I don't believe that it gives access to bikes coming off there. There are 2 wide pavements, which are right outside somebody's house, and a really quite narrow road. Somebody had parked on it yesterday. It didn't really give a lot of room for a car to come down the other side of it. I reiterate what I've said about my concerns over the security of putting a large number of service personnel all together and becoming a local target. And the one question I would raise about you talked about being 100% affordable housing, but it's not affordable housing for Herefordshire residents, except, of course, for a time. The soldiers or whoever comes into those houses are being housed there, and for a time they are part of Hereford. But the housing is being bought, and therefore it will never, I don't expect in my lifetime, become available, affordable housing for people who we genuinely think need affordable housing. So with those points in mind, I think I don't need to add further at this stage.
Thank you. I'd just make the comment that I have to say we're all only here for a time. Yeah.
Can we make it to the next planning meeting?
Yeah. Right. We have a proposal. It's been proposed and seconded. Can I ask for those in favour, please show? Final item, which I hope will be less complex and famous last words, and we can deal with this. Thank you.
I'll try to be done.
Pardon?
I'll try to be done before the cafe closes.
Yes.
Why wouldn't you want to have a school with extra?
Yeah, I know, but there is a slight complication. Right, we'll move on as swiftly as we can. The application concerns Hampton Dean Primary School, Church Road, Hereford. Proposed extension of existing primary school to provide 2 additional classrooms and resources support spaces. Extension of existing car park, relocation of 2 number storage sheds and associated hard and soft landscaping and biodiversity improvements. Can I now move to the officer's presentation, Mr. Bailey?
Thank you, Chairman.
Or is it Mr. Banks?
Sorry, Mr. Bailey. I haven't changed my name via D-poll since this morning, but I'll just wait for the presentation to come up. I'll make a start anyway. The application site relates to Hampton Dean Primary School, which straddles the Iron Hill and Tupsley wards of Hereford City. Topography of the site very gently falls across from northwest to southeast, with boundary treatments comprising mesh security fencing to 3 sides, with hedgerow, trees and high close board fencing forming the northwestern site boundary. As you just heard from the Chairman, this application seeks full planning permission for a proposed extension to the southeast of the existing Languages and Communication Centre at the school, with a focus on special educational needs and disability students, hereafter SEND. This includes 2 new classrooms with group rooms, learning resource, support spaces, offices, therapy room, quiet room, additional toilets, covered external play areas and sensory gardens. The classrooms will be finished in yellow brick in stretcher bond and soldier course and timber effect cladding under an anthracite grey zinc standing seam roof and bitumen flat roof. To facilitate the extra school places which would be created, a proposed extension to the southwest of the existing school car park is sought to provide additional parking, which would be finished in Tarmacadam to match existing. As a result of the proposed car park extension, the application also proposes the relocation of 2 existing storage sheds further southwest, together with associated hard and soft landscaping and biodiversity enhancements also sought, including learning and play areas, covered soft play areas being accessible through the new classrooms, as well as the sensory gardens and planters for outdoor learning. Just for clarification, the application is before the committee, as this is a council application which has generated a material objection from Sport England only in their role as a statutory consultee, and there has been no other public interest in the application. And just for context, the application site is denoted by the red star on screen. And next slide, please. Which should bring up an aerial photograph of the site and the surrounding area, where land uses are predominantly residential, although other educational establishments are in close proximity, including St Paul's C of E Primary School, which you can see to the east, and Bishop's High School further northeast. Vehicular and pedestrian access is taken directly off Church Road, and there are no heritage or landscape designations affecting this site. The site also lies wholly within Flood Zone 1 and is not considered to be constrained by pluvial flooding on available mapping. And the next slide, please, which will just bring up the site location plan, which is edged in red. And the next slide, which will bring up the proposed site plan showing the extent of the proposed classroom and car park extensions, together with their associated works. And the next slides, please, which will bring up both the existing elevations there in your top left and then the proposed elevations down there in the bottom right. And the next slide, which just brings up an extract of the proposed floor plan in relation to the classroom extensions. I trust members can self-serve themselves on its details. And the next slide, please, which will just bring up the car park extension, which just shows there a swept path analysis of the proposed increase in vehicles on site. And the next slide, please, which then comes to photographs. So this first one's taken from just inside the eastern boundary of the school, looking northwest towards the classroom extension, and then you've got some properties there on St Paul's Road just to the far left of your picture. And the next slide, which is taken more from the south of the site, looking towards the northeast, and you've got St Paul's Church there. You can just see the steeple in the background there on the right. And the next slide, which is taken towards the north of the site, looking north towards the existing storage sheds and current western edge of the car park. And the next slide, it's just looking a bit around the corner more towards the northwest with regards to the proposed relocation of the 2 sheds and extension of the car park. And the next slide, please, which is just 2 photographs which covers the sort of the extent of the land that will be set aside for mandatory biodiversity net gain. And the next slide, which is now going to bring up a couple of street view images, beginning with this one, which is taken from Hampton Dean Road, looking north. And the next slide, which we're going to take now from the eastern boundary adjacent to the mini roundabout for Hampton Dean Road and Church Road, looking northwest into the site. And then the next one is going to be taken from more sort of the northeastern boundary, or eastern boundary again, looking west from Church Road into site. And the next slide, please, which will just bring up then the relevant material planning considerations, which are I've put there on screen, but they largely follow the officer report. And just to summarise again, that the application is solely before you due to a statutory objection which has been received from Sport England, in that the proposal results in the net loss of a modest proportion of existing playing field provision without alternative or replacement playing field being proposed. All other material considerations are viewed to be acceptable, and in the view of officers, the substantial benefits arising from the enhanced SEN provision, given the critical shortfall of places at a county level, is viewed to outweigh the moderate harm identified. Whilst this does amount to a significant material consideration, which would mean taking a decision which departs from the adopted development plan, it would reiterate this council's commitment to the delivery of its SEN strategy of 2023 to 2026. As you'll see in the schedule of updates, further to recent exchanges since the publication of the report between officers, the applicant and Sport England, it is possible that Sport England may well remove their objection, but due to the fact that the time-sensitive nature of them wanting to get the application to committee, that hasn't been resolved as of yet. So we have put forward a revised recommendation to possibly avoid any unnecessary notification to the Secretary of State should further information be provided and Sport England subsequently withdrawing its objection. So should members resolve to support the proposal, as I've just explained, in accordance with the Town and Country Planning Consultation Direction of 2024, the Secretary of State will need to be consulted before the local planning authority can determine its application in this particular instance, but a resolution is nevertheless required from the committee on which to base this decision on. Thank you, Chairman.
Thank you. Right, there are no public speakers. Can I ask that the local member, who is Councillor Foxton, instigates the debate?
Thank you. This is a very straightforward application. This is a council application with no objection from the public. However, Sports England, a statutory consultee, has raised an objection against the loss of a relatively small area of playing field. However, they might ease off on that. Therefore, the application has to be presented to committee. The partial loss of playing field amounts to approximately 10%, and I think you might agree that a 10% reduction is a very modest reduction. The main reason for the application is the urgent need for extra provision for children with special educational needs and disabilities. Hereford Council needs to provide specific educational needs for children. There's a critical shortfall of 239 places, I'm told, in Herefordshire, and Hampton Dean School will be helping to reduce the shortfall. Here we've got a golden opportunity for members of the Planning Committee to fully support an application to improve facilities for children with moderate complex needs. Okay, thank you.
Councillor Baker and then Councillor Simmons and the Councillor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. The report speaks for itself. Can I suggest we go straight to the vote for approval?
Right. Is that seconded? Yeah. Seconded, Councillor Andrews. Councillor Simmons, do you want to?
Yes, I do want to say something before we move straight to the vote. So I do just want to say it is with regret that we do lose any play space provision, football space, etc., or hockey or whatever you want to play on there, particularly athletics track as well. I do think, though, that given the urban constraints of the location and the overriding need for SEND, as has been said already, that yes, this does outweigh, the benefits outweigh the harms. I just wanted to point and acknowledge, as the report done, that there are harms. Thank you.
Councillor Andrews and then Councillor Harvey.
I can only support this application. It's already been said the demand for SEND education is increasing year by year, it seems. And at the moment, we're very expensively sending children elsewhere. I've got a friend whose child is being educated in Gloucestershire because we have no facilities here. So I heartily support this application.
Councillor Harvey.
Yes, just to pile in on Councillor Simmons' point, I think as a planning committee, it's important that we acknowledge the work that Sport England do in challenging where sports facilities are lost or green spaces is put under threat. There may be applications that come to us in the future where this is a very serious point in question, and I think it's important that the committee actually demonstrates that we have weighed this in the planning balance and that we do take the input of Sport England very seriously.
Oh yes, we just. I don't think you need to say.
All I was just going to say is we are working with Sport England to
Yeah,
try and
yeah.
alleviate that objection. That's why the recommendation has been amended. So
Yeah.
if we can sort it, we don't need to go to the Secretary of State.
We'll go finally to the local member. Councillor.
If the application is approved, which is going that way, there is still ample green space for games, sporting activities, sports days, including sufficient space for children to keep super fit with run, walk, whatever, a mile a day. So it's a modest amount that's being removed, albeit sadly. Thank you.
Okay, well now we have the proposal which has been proposed and seconded along the lines of the officer's recommendation. Can I ask those in favour, please indicate. I think that... Yep, that is carried. Thank you all for your attendance and a safe journey home.